Thank you for offering us just a tad bit of grace and getting started this afternoon. And Director Garrett, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. I have three things to share with the Commission and the good folks in the audience and watching. First, I want to speak about the Oregon Rail and Public Transit Division and the Railroad Baggage Depot. It continues to garner hardware here. So I'd like to share this good news. The Salem Railroad Baggage Depot Restoration Project received an Oregon Heritage Excellence Award from the Parks and Recreation Department, specifically the Oregon Heritage Commission. The Heritage Excellence Award recognizes individuals, businesses, and organizations for outstanding efforts in making the most of existing resources of Oregon heritage. The Salem Depot, as you know, was selected for excellence in working across agencies, overcoming challenges, and merging multiple modes of transportation to rehabilitate a historic building. The Oregon Heritage Commission presented the award at their Heritage Excellence Award banquet, which took place at their commission's annual awards banquet in Medford on April 25th. I think Mr. Gard was there to pick up the hardware. You may recall that this is the second significant award for this project. In November of last year, the Salem Depot was awarded the prestigious DeMuro Award for Excellence in Preservation, Reuse, and Community Revitalization. So Mr. Gard and all the partners who made that project happen, a job well done, and it's being recognized from pretty specific and significant individuals. Madam Chair, I want to turn to an opportunity that three of our ODOT employees had to spend a little time with Governor Brown. As you may know, that Governor Brown proclaimed May 8th of 2019 to be State Employee Recognition Day in Oregon, and she encouraged all Oregonians to join in this observance. She signed a proclamation. I will paraphrase that proclamation very quickly because I think it encompasses who we are as an agency and the individual I'll speak to later. So the proclamation has embedded in it several whereases. I'll share a couple. Whereas state employees are ambassadors of public service, exemplifying values of integrity, accountability, excellence, and equity in their everyday work. And whereas state employees provide essential services to Oregonians in many areas, including healthcare, education, human services, public safety, transportation, consumer and business services, economic development, natural resources, and recreation. And finally, whereas state employees represent a broad spectrum of ethnic, racial, religious backgrounds, abilities, ages, gender identities, sexual orientations, and service in our armed forces, embodying the rich diversity present in the population they serve. Now, therefore, I, Kate Brown, Governor of the State of Oregon, hereby proclaim May 8th, 2019 State Employee Recognition Day. So as mentioned, we had three individuals that were selected to join Governor Brown in celebrating Public Service Employee Week, and I'm proud to recognize them and thank them for joining the governor, as well as all they do for the Oregon Department of Transportation and the great state of Oregon. The three individuals were John Baker. He is an economist in our Government Relations Office. Our own OTC Executive Assistant, Michelle Bryant, had that opportunity, as well as our Active Transportation State Programs Lead, Katie Thiel. Congratulations to all of them. These individuals truly embody the notion that we are ambassadors for public service. The final thing I want to share with you is about infrastructure. Now, there is a joke in D.C. these days that it's always Infrastructure Week because both parties of Congress as well as the White House are always talking about how they need to enhance and invest in infrastructure for the great nation. Except this week it really is Infrastructure Week, which is why we saw two reports come out this week on the state of the nation's infrastructure. First, the repair priorities are from the Transportation for America, or T4America organization, looked at the conditions of the roads across this nation. They found between 2009 and 2017, the portions of road in poor condition increased across the nation from 14 to 20%. Only 13 states bucked that trend, and Oregon was one of them. In fact, according to the report, we're doing better than most other states. We have the fifth best pavement condition measured by the percent of roads in poor condition. Although we don't stack up as well if you flip that on its head and look at the percentages of roads in good condition. We've got a whole bunch of roads in that fair condition. The second report came, it's a report card, so to speak, the infrastructure report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Now, I had the privilege of speaking at their press conference yesterday, and while we are scoring better than the national average, it's clear the work to enhance the condition and the resiliency of our infrastructure is nowhere near complete. It probably is a race that does not have a finish line, if we're going to be honest with that conversation. But the ASCE is also known to be a notoriously hard but fair grader on infrastructure conditions. And they gave the state of Oregon overall a GPA of C-. Now, this was across 10 areas of infrastructure that ranged from transportation to water to energy. So in the 3 areas of transportation infrastructure, the highest score was a C+ for roads, and this just happens to be the highest grade for the entire Oregon report card. Bridges and the rail here in the state received a C grade. Now, I say they are tough and fair because we know we have some of the best bridge conditions in America if measured by the relative low number of bridges in poor condition. We have about 1.9% of bridges in poor condition. But they are fair, and they also acknowledged that, and acknowledged correctly, they noted the number of large bridges, and we saw this earlier today in our workshop, a large number of bridges in fair condition, and given their design life and the other stressors they face, they are on the cusp of moving from fair to poor in the near future here. And we also have a significant seismic exposure, and that was noted, thus the grade that we had. So I shared my thoughts that, and this may date me, but given the report card where the state's GPA was C-, remind me of the youngster who may be running to the mailbox to get that report card before mom and dad got it, because it's not something that we're proud of. We aspire for greater things. We saw a significant investment in 2017 that continues to move us forward. Our conversation this morning just affirmed that we have much more to do, and we will remain steadfast in ensuring that we enhance and improve and make more resilient the transportation infrastructure here in the state of Oregon. Madam Chair, with that, I'll stand down.
Director Garrett, thank you very much for that update and report. And I would like to thank the individuals who have made the choice to have ODOT be their place of employment and to serve the state of Oregon. It's an honor to serve alongside each and every one of you. So with that, I will move on to public comment. And if you've not had a chance to sign up, please just signal as much here in just in one moment. I'd like to invite Mary Coolidge to join us first. It's Mary, oh, wonderful, great to see you. And I have in front of us as well a document that you've left. Do please hit the button and so that you can see the red light come on. And we do play a game of who can make it turn on faster. A little. Oh, you got it.
I did.
They're
Okay.
they're just fickle. And then the clock is 3 minutes, and the floor is yours. Please state your name for the record, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Mary Coolidge. I work for Portland Audubon, and we operate statewide, and we have over 15,000 members, many of whom are concerned about the issue of light pollution, which is a growing issue in our state and in our world. I am here to testify on the Region 1 pilot relamping project, as well as the Markham Bridge relamping project. Audubon met recently with Michael Kimlinger, Elizabeth Papadopoulos, and Ted Miller regarding our concerns about blue-rich white light. I really want to say that we appreciate their time and their due diligence in researching this issue and hearing our concerns, also on gathering information about the issue of blue-rich white light. ODOT currently specifies 4,000 Kelvin LEDs for their projects. I imagine you all know that. And intends, as far as I know, to continue to spec 4,000 Kelvin LEDs for these two upcoming projects. The issue is that this kind of bulb emits what is known as blue-rich white light, which scatters very readily in the atmosphere, more so than longer wavelength light. I understand that that efficiency is a primary driver in the decision to spec those lamps. However, we would urge ODOT to consider that significant advances in LED technology mean that now 4,000 Kelvin lamps and 3,000 Kelvin lamps are really comparable in terms of their efficiency and their efficacy, which makes them a more sensible choice in terms of protecting human health, the night sky, and the nocturnal environment. Washington Department of Transportation, our neighbor to the north, has been installing 3,000 Kelvin LEDs in areas like Goldendale, the Puget Sound area, and in sensitive riparian areas. They are also now moving away from using 4,000 Kelvin bulbs. They will be using all 3,000 Kelvin bulbs statewide. They're doing this because they are satisfied with the efficacy of these lamps. So they are going to be undertaking a project beginning in Seattle, moving to Tacoma, then Olympia and Vancouver. This move really demonstrates innovative, adaptive leadership on this issue. And we would urge ODOT to follow suit by also specifying 3,000 kelvins for all future lighting conversions. There's a large and growing body of research on the deleterious impacts of blue-rich white light, on migrating and nesting birds, on fish, mammals, amphibians, plants, and also on human health. Blue-rich white light can influence movement patterns of nocturnal animals, can alter predator-prey relationships, disorient migrating birds, can increase stress hormone levels in nesting birds, which has implications for their fledglings. It also penetrates water very well, triggering daytime behavior in fish and in their predators. This kind of light also impacts human health. In fact, in 2016, the American Medical Association released a report recommending against the installation of blue-rich white light on city streets. They cited discomfort and disability glare both, as well as potential links to cardiovascular disease, obesity, and breast cancer. Regarding the Markham Bridge project, light trespass onto neighboring properties as well as off the bridge deck is concerning regarding human health, as well as the health of Willamette River fish, including Chinook salmon. I would encourage you to follow best practices in lighting design in all projects, which includes using the least amount of lumens necessary for the application, fully shielding all light so that no light is cast above 90 degrees, and that none of that light trespasses onto neighboring properties or sensitive habitats. Also, installation of adaptive lighting systems where practical to allow time of day controls. This can also be a real money-saving effort. And use of 3,000 Kelvin lamps, which is consistent with American Medical Association recommendations, International Dark Sky Association recommendations, and also new specifications set forth by the Washington Department of Transportation. The decisions we make now have very long-term impacts. I know that you all know LEDs last 20 years or more. So I would encourage ODOT to review the 4,000 Kelvin specifications that they've been using. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for that. I have a question. Do you know what the actual, I guess, average or typical luminaires are for a typical halogen bulb?
I'm not exactly sure what typical would mean, but I think generally speaking, when we think of halogen, we think of a very bright blue light. So also blue-rich white light. In general, I think lighting systems on Oregon's ODOT lanes of travel are actually high pressure sodium. So the conversion is more generally from high pressure sodium, which is a fairly yellow amber light, to 4,000 Kelvin LED, which is a quite white, blue-rich white light.
And so what are the luminaires of the standard ones you're referring to?
The standard ones that I'm recommending that you use.
No, the ones that you're saying that are currently on ODOT facilities.
They're currently high pressure sodium. ODOT has been for a number of years converting as opportunities arrive, as well as in discrete projects, to 4,000 Kelvin LEDs.
Great.
Early generation LEDs were much more efficient than blue-rich white light LEDs were much more efficient than their warmer counterparts. But LED technology is advancing very rapidly, and that has all changed. And so now the efficiency and efficacy is really comparable.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shall I turn this off?
Go ahead and leave it on, just so, for the next individual. And I have Carolyn Whitney, and we also have a document in front of us that is from you. Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. So, Madam Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Carolyn Whitney, and I'm here today to represent Friends of River Place. I don't know if all of you have heard of Friends of River Place or not, but we've been in partnership with you, with ODOT, on a number of different projects, cleaning up trash in our area and advocating for PBOT to take over the responsibility of dealing with the homeless on your property. So I'm here today to speak for the folks of River Place. There's the Strand condominium where I live, and then we're working in close association with other businesses that are there, the Marriott, the Hyatt, the McCormick and Schmick's, the River Place Hotel, and then an Italian restaurant there, La Trazo. And they're all concerned about the lights, having seen the 2 that have been installed. I've been in conversation with Ellen Sweeney at ODOT, who tells me that the 2 lights that were installed in January, February timeframe are the lights that are going to be put on the bridge. And you can see from that picture that I attached to the letter that they are extremely white. And those are taken from my condo, so it tells you what I'm exposed to. And to be honest, I'm a little bit confused because I kind of getting into the game late here, but I did read a letter that the Transportation Commission wrote to the Rose City Astronomy in Portland that said that the lights that are going to be used to address pollution, these LED lights, use cutoff lenses, which means that there's less ambient light, and it will be put down on the roadway because of these cutoff lenses that are in the lights that are installed. And so I've requested 2 meetings with Oregon Department of Transportation and have yet to be able to do that. But I really would like to understand what the options are for doing something with that ambient light. And as I said, the businesses are concerned about that too, because it's going to be shining into their hotel rooms and into especially outside seating. Another thing that was brought up in the letter from OTC to the astronomy group was that the LED lights are at 400K are being installed on the bridge because of safety concerns, especially for pedestrians and bicyclists. And there aren't pedestrians or bicyclists on that bridge. In addition to that, I would say that I looked at the ODOT information about accidents, and most of the accidents on the bridge happen around 5 o'clock, which I think there's only a month maybe when it's dark enough. So in summary, I can see that my time is up. I would ask that ODOT slow down until we figure out. I understood from Ellen Sweeney that the further installation of those lights may happen as early as June, and so I'm asking that this be slowed down until we figure out what to do with the ambient light. I'm suggesting too that the lights be changed to something warmer, so 3,000 or 2,700 gallons. And I don't know, to be honest, what cutoff lenses are, but I noticed on the freeway that there are some shields or some hoods that are put over some lights, and that might be an option for getting to the light to shine just on the roadway. And it's really a lot of ambient light, I think you can see from the picture. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Sorry, do we have questions? Thank you very much for your testimony and for bringing this to our attention. And Director Garrett, could we could take this offline and have a conversation. I'm not sure who the point person might be, but I think we have a response here that is necessary, as well as maybe a connection to someone within the department?
Well, I think that's exactly right, Madam Chair. We'll have the appropriate technical service. I think Mr. Kimlinger is right back there. You heard the conversation.
great.
He's my, Mike, stand up.
We'd like to make an introduction.
Why don't we take advantage of having these good
Wonderful.
folks
Okay,
here right now and have a conversation?
excellent,
And
thank you.
then we'll follow up, Madam Chair.
Really appreciate your investment of time.
Is
and-
someone else testifying, or should I?
Go ahead and leave it on. You bet. That's just fine. And for your partnership in helping us clean up that particular area as well. Thank you so much. All right. And last on the list, I have Roberta Robles. So if you want to use the same spot, it's already on. Wonderful to see you again. And please state your name for the record. And thank you for joining us.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Roberta Robles. I am here. Let's get that closer. I'm a traffic engineer with about 15 years of experience in freight logistics, including the ODOT Bridge Replacement Program, the OTIA program. I ran the GIS NEPA database for the 400 bridges and the environmental assessment of those. I'm very familiar with the NEPA process and the data requirements. However, after that, I was zonked from that project, burnt me out big time. I moved to New Zealand and did freight transport logistics planning in New Zealand, where I took over to them the interchange area management plans that were interesting to them in New Zealand. They had the same issues, except learning how to be a transport engineer in New Zealand was kind of difficult because they drive on the other side of the road. So anyways, I came back home, had 2 babies, and was like, oh, the CRC fell over. We're not getting a CRC. What can we do right now within the right-of-way to ease congestion? Okay, so if the city of Vancouver, they opted for a bus rapid transit system, and I just drove that system 2 weeks ago. It's looking like hard infrastructure. It doesn't quite look like a BRT right now, but they are moving in that direction. That is their decision. We should respect what they want. So if we want to show respect for our northern neighbors, we should consider a bus rapid transit between downtown Vancouver and downtown Portland as an immediate congestion relief project that we can implement this summer by using the basic fundamentals of network analysis. The more connections you have on the network, the slower it goes. Between downtown Portland and downtown Vancouver, there are too many interchanges too close together, and they don't weave properly. So you get all of the backup that you have right now. So how do we weave that together with freight logistics planning? Well, we have 2 international ports right there. And so the work that I did at Auckland Port was the last mile journey to get these trucks to where they need to go at that last mile. Usually it's to the ports. Maybe we need an extended port-to-port connection across that bridge that is shared with this BRT system. Can we give journey time reliability to freight and buses? And that's what I want to talk about, is dialing down the freeways at the ramps, opening it up to the vehicles we want to prioritize, like buses and trucks. Okay, so that's the difference here in what we're trying to achieve at the Rose Quarter, is really focusing our infrastructure dollars on the vehicles we want to prioritize. So we're not here to build another auxiliary lane so that the people in Vancouver can get down to Clackamas to their job, or get to downtown Portland. If they want to get to downtown Portland, they have a BRT system already set up. Like maybe half of the day we give it to the bus, maybe the other half of the day we give it to freight. Okay, that's what I can do. So as far as using the terms auxiliary lanes in a NEPA process, that is questionable. So if you want to move this project forward as fast as you can, you better make sure that it's directed at the vehicles you want to prioritize and not inducing more demand on that section. We need to be very strategic. This is where I-84 crosses I-5. This is a big deal. If we truly are leaders, we need to be leaders in new technologies for priority vehicles. Thank you. My name is Roberta Robles. I grew up in Florence, Oregon, and my kids go to school at Harriet Tubman.
Thank you, and thank you very much for joining us earlier today. We look forward to further conversations. Okay, anyone else who's interested in approaching the commission on public comment? All right, so we will go on to item C. We have the award of some funds. Mr. Guard, I will call you up. Ms. Hoskins, and Hal, will I turn this over to you? Okay, excellent, and then when we get to the motion portion of this as well, we have a little orchestrating to do. So wonderful to see you.
And I shall leave that orchestration in your good hands, Chair Boehne. So, Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, I'm Hal Guard. I'm the Administrator of the Rail and Public Transit Division for the Oregon Department of Transportation. Thanks for having us back. I'm joined by Ms. Marcia Hoskins, who is the Manager of the Transit Section within the division. As the Commission may recall, we spent a little time last spring outlining our regular system and process for distributing the various monies that were responsible for getting out to service providers. And the goal of that conversation was to really establish a regular sequence, and when we come before the Commission, not unlike how we do the STIP development. However, our award cycle is a little more compressed, so we need to be in front of you for various decisions at about a quarterly basis through the 2-year cycle that we have for distribution of funds. So let's see, we have slides? There we go. So last spring, we kind of walked through the development of both our discretionary project awards and our formula changes for distribution of the formula funds in our various program areas. And at that time, we were also standing up the new STIF. We had our rules approved for how we distributed our money for the STIF in the summer. In the fall, you had the pleasure of adopting the Oregon Public Transportation Plan. Now we are back in that cycle. You just recently approved the first round of STIP plans. That was a great day. And now this is really where we're focusing on distribution of our federal and state formula awards. So as you may recall, the public transportation funds come into the state in a variety of fashions. So there are FTA funds that are awarded directly to the large urban service providers. We don't really have a hand in that area. However, for many of the rural recipients, the funds come to us and then we distribute them. We distribute them in 2 ways, either through a formula based upon population and percent of elderly population, or they are put out as discretionary grants to fund specific projects or elements. So that's where we've landed. This particular request is for the Transportation Commission's approval for the awards for the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program, the Federal Transit Administration Formula Grants for Rural Areas Program, and for the State Special Transportation Fund Program for the 2019-2021 biennium. You previously approved the formula, and normally this would kind of be a consent item, but given the amount of money of this particular outlay, about approximately $40 million, felt it appropriate to come back to the Commission and receive your formal blessing on that allocation. For the details, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hoskins here, and she will walk through the what and the why.
They are a little, there you are. You got it. Wonderful to see you.
Challenged. So, Chair Boehne, Commissioners, for the record, my name is Marcia Hoskins. I'm the Public Transportation Manager for the Rail and Public Transit Division. And as Hal noted, we promised last spring that we'd be before you to talk about our 2019-21 biennial formula awards. I'm going to apologize ahead of time that my slides are out of order with my handouts. I'm just going to blame it on overworked and underpaid staff, and I will direct you to which handout has the detail if you're interested for these given formula awards. So the slide that's currently up talks about the FTA Section 5310 formula awards. This is for enhanced mobility of seniors and people with disabilities. This is detailed on attachment 3 if you want to look at the detail, but I'll give you the overview of what this is. We actually get a federal appropriation of money for FTA Section 5310. Additionally, the Oregon legislature in the JTA era directed a transfer of funds from the Surface Transportation Program into this FTA Section 5310 program. So we're talking around $24 million that's awarded every biennium. These dollars are distributed by formula to 42 agencies who are also our Special Transportation Fund agencies. They are now also the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund qualified entities. So these 42 agencies have a lot on their plate, as I'm sure Chair Beatty and Commissioner Brown can attest, being associated with those agencies. The funds are formula allocated based on portions allocated based on total population. A portion is allocated based on elderly and disabled population to these agencies, which consist of transportation districts, counties, and federally recognized tribes. These local agencies hold a process by which they solicit for projects. They have advisory committees review the projects, and they forward to us their proposed use for their formula allocation. That's the piece that's detailed in attachment 4. As you can see, there's capital equipment, facilities, maintenance, vehicles, some mobility management, and contracted services that are all purchased with these formula funds. All right. The next slide references attachment 4. Sorry, I might be out over here. This is FTA Section 5311. Now, these are also formula funds. They are a federal appropriation to us. They go to 35 different agencies, some of which are similar, the same agencies as the 5310, but others, there are some cities and some councils of government that are actually recognized recipients for the FTA. Rural General Public Transportation is what these funds are used for. You may recall last year, this formula was adjusted by our Public Transportation Advisory Committee. They stood up a work group and adjusted the formula, and the Commission approved that formula. It distributes funds to these agencies with a minimum base and then a proportional share based on rides and miles, with the intent being that it's a bit more performance-based, depending on how many rides you provide, how many miles of service that you do. This is, again, distributed to the 35 applicants who run a local process, solicit for projects, and as you'll see on attachment 4, it's used for largely operating, but also administration projects, and then one agency proposed a capital project, as well as some maintenance, mobility management, and purchase service funds for this $18.6 million. The last fund is our State Special Transportation Fund. This fund is also a formula allocation. It's actually a formula entitlement detailed in rule and statute. Goes to the 42 Special Transportation Fund agencies. The revenue for this fund comes from cigarette tax, photo ID cards, non-road gas tax, and a little bit of general fund. The 42 agencies are given a formula allocation for the biennium. Again, being an entitlement, it is up to them what kind of process they run. The restriction that's put on the funds is they have to go for services that benefit transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. Beyond that, it's very flexible. Probably our most flexible source of funds prior to the Special Transportation or Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. So on attachment 2, you will see the formula allocation to those agencies. They do submit an application to tell us who they're going to pass those funds out to and generally what they're going to use them for, but since it's already detailed out in rule and law, we don't approve those per se. It's more for our information, what they're going to use them for. That's yours.
So Chair, many members of the commission, if you approve of the distribution of this money, I would ask for a motion.
Do we have, sorry, questions or comments first? Please. Uh-huh.
I am. I just think it's amazing when I look at this list. This used to be the total funding for transit before the STIF, and it's just, it really is an eye-opener and a reminder to me how far we've come, and just thank you and your staff for your hard work. And I know that when we were looking at these applications and moving forward, I told the employees, don't go for a lower level. We're going to just assume that the Ways and Means Committee is going to get this passed, and so keep our fingers crossed that we don't have to see a reduction in these funds.
Thank you, and thank you for your involvement as well. Do we have other questions or comments? Okay, shall we walk through a motion?
So, yes, happy to do that. I've been asked to do this, Hal, and first of all, thank you for your presentation and all the good work that you're doing on this new program, which is an excellent program and a great improvement in the state system of funding. We actually have, you'll be delighted to hear, 12 motions, but we'll get through them. And that's because we have various of us, the three of us, who have various conflicts with respect to specific grant recipients, so we're going to walk through it. So I'm going to take them a little out of the order you presented them in, but we'll get all of this done. I think we have a total of 11 motions. I'll be making 8 of them, and Commissioner Simpson will be making the other 3. The first area we're going to have motions with respect to are the approval of the 2019-2021 Special Transportation Fund Program proposed grants. And so I'll begin with motion 1. I move for approval of the award notice for the 2019-2021 Special Fund Program formula, except for the awards to Crook, Deschutes, Jefferson, and Josephine counties, to TriMet, and to the Rogue Valley Transportation District.
Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone? Okay, so we don't have an abstention. Good.
The second motion is as follows. I move for approval of the award notice for the 2019-2021 Special Transportation Fund Program formula for Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties.
Any further discussion? Okay.
You have to declare.
I will at the,
Okay.
so I will be abstaining at the, on this particular item.
Okay.
Any
so-
further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any other abstentions outside of my own? Okay.
Commissioner Simpson, do you want to do
Yes.
motion 3?
Motion 3, excuse me. Move for approval for awards notice for the 2019-21 Special Transportation Fund Program formula for TriMet in Josephine County.
Okay. Any
So,
further
my law firm represents TriMet and also Josephine County, and therefore I'll be recusing myself from this vote.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion 4.
I move to approve award notice for the 2019-2021 Special Transportation Fund Program formula for the Rogue Valley Transportation District.
Okay.
And as the general manager, I'll abstain.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, with one abstention.
We're now going to move to the 2019-21 Enhanced Mobility of Senior and Individuals with Disabilities Fund. I move for approval of award notice for the 2019-21 Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Fund, except for the awards to Crook, Deschutes, Jefferson, Josephine counties, TriMet, and the Rogue Valley Transportation District.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion
I
carries.
move for approval of award notice for the 2019-2021 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Fund for Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties.
Okay, and I will be abstaining. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Yolanda?
I move for approval for award of the 2019-2021 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disability Fund for TriMet in Josephine County.
My law firm represents TriMet in Josephine County, and therefore I'll be recusing myself from this motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I move to approve the award notice for the 2019-21 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Fund for Rogue Valley Transportation District.
And I again will be abstaining.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
With respect to the award notices for the 2019-2021 Formula Funds for Rural Areas, I move for approval of award notice for the 2019-2021 Formula Funds for rural areas except for Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council and Josephine County.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I move for approval of award notice for 2019-2021 Formula Funds for rural areas for Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council.
And as Executive Director, I will be abstaining. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And finally, I move for approval of award notice for 2019-20.
I think you're abstaining.
Oh, I'm abstaining,
okay.
sorry.
Nope, we're good. Yep, okay.
So anxious to finish.
Yeah. Right here, Coach. I'm open. And with that, I move for approval to award notice of the 2019-2021 Formula Funds for Rural Areas for Josephine County.
Great.
I represent my law firm represents Josephine County, and therefore I'll be recusing myself and abstaining.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Team, thank you so much. Really appreciate the hard work.
Commissioners, that ranks within the top 10 most amazing things I think I've ever seen. Thank you for that.
Thank
Next time, we're
you.
going to try and make it more complicated.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate both of you. Okay, moving with the theme of partnership, I'd like to welcome our representatives from TriMet to join us. And please come up, Mr. Kelsey, and an opportunity for us to hear what's happening in your area. And I just want a quick moment of saying that I truly enjoyed having an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. We are fortunate to have you in the state of Oregon with your leadership and vast experience. And so wonderful to be in partnership of providing service. And so I will turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. Chair Boehne, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today to discuss TriMet's the exciting opportunities that are in front of us, and also some of the challenges as well that come with growth and management of our existing infrastructure, and particularly in a changing world. I've divided my comments for probably approximately 15 minutes into about 4 key areas. The first, I'd like to give you just a quick overview of TriMet's mission and duties, our ridership performance, and our current fiscal situation at TriMet. In fact, our mission, vision, mission, and values are changing, so it becomes important in this time in this industry. Second, I'd like to cover how the region is going to be changing and growing, and what's TriMet's role and how do we play in that space with all of our partners, critical partners. Third, I'd like to talk about innovation in this industry because it is changing rapidly. And fourth, and finally, I'd like to talk about generally the future, how we are trying to be a leader, a thought leader, and a contributor to the to stay ahead of the congestion that is on us now and more to come. So if I may, I'll just kick into the first. A quick overview of TriMet. Some of you know a lot about TriMet already, but we provide just shy of 100 million trips per year across all of our modes, and that's just about 300,000 trips on a weekly average day. We'd like to say we basically move a mid-sized city every single day. We serve the country's 24th largest metro area, but we hit above our belt actually because we are the 9th in the per capita ridership. 12 million of our annual trips are by seniors and people with disabilities, including about 1 million trips who use our Lyft or our paratransit program. We're proud of the fleet, accessible low-floor buses and light rail vehicles. And in fact, we currently have 26 vehicles that are not ADA compliant, but we are changing those out at the cost of $150 million. TriMet will become one of the first multi-integrated transit agencies in the United States that will be 100% physical infrastructure accessible.
Wow.
45% of downtown commuters use transit during our peak commute hours. All told, we eliminate about 200,000 auto trips from the system every day and growing.
We should just pause and say thank you.
Well, thank you. So it really does take a village. Under the management of our board of directors appointed by the governor, our TriMet's financial situation would be rated exceptionally sound, not by us, but what you see on the screen behind you, by the international bond rating agencies of the world. We've been rated not twice, but by 3 independent bond rating agencies, and we are the only integrated transportation agency in North America with a AAA bond rating. As I tell our own team, it's hard to keep and it's easy to lose. But it does reflect the construct, the risks, the liabilities, the overall structure of the agency and its related historical performance, particularly for Neil McFarlane, the board, and those who've gone before myself and others. 73% of regional residents also, in a recent survey, had rated TriMet as favorable or very favorable, as rated as the most favorable government agency in the metropolitan area of Portland recently this spring.
Doug, who's in second place? Oh, okay, I see it.
You see it?
Yeah,
I'm passing you the ball.
Yeah, okay.
So we're supposed to pass the ball right now? Okay. There's no question the region is growing. The population is expected to grow from 2.45 million residents today to over 3 million by 2040, when you include Clark County in Washington State. That's a game changer. More than 2,300 new people every month for the next 20 years is what's coming into this exciting region and dynamic region. That's like fitting another city of the population important within the region that you see today. And with these changes to the region, TriMet's vision that the board of directors has just approved is also changing. We are going to be moving from a transit agency to an integrated mobility agency to handle the Ubers, the Lyfts, the e-scooters, and who knows what else. We can't just rely on just our stripe of the handoffs. Someone is going to have to integrate those daily trips, and we believe TriMet is extremely well positioned, and it forces us to think differently than we do today as being a unisupplier of buses, trains, paratransit. So there is unprecedented growth as a result of, and thanks to you and many others, of putting HB 2017 fund improvements in place. It is a great and appreciated step, but I would suggest it is just a step. The ODOT staff, Director Garrett, Deputy Director Travis Brower, Hal Gard, Karen Criswell, and Ryan Winsheimer in particular, I'd really like to send a special thank you to in our partnership with them. When you lead large groups such as they do, it is not easy. And there's many complexities that come with those relationships, but we have a very positive relationship with ODOT as well as Metro and our other partners in this region. It is really going to be more important than ever before for where we're going. TriMet's developed a plan for HB 17 to roll out expanded services over the next 5 years, as you know, as we absorb new state funding. A few examples: we're going to add 5 entirely new bus lines in the region, upgrade our frequency on 10 other existing lines, extend 2 lines to 24-hour service, add 5 new lines to our 15-minute, what we call frequent service lines, taking 4 existing frequent service lines to 12 minutes, not 15, to manage the capacities and the demand. That will also include adding articulated buses with 3-door, all-door boarding, extensive upgrades to our bus stops, stations, and amenities around the stations as well. We also are pursuing, as you may be aware, we've just been granted $87.5 million from the FTA. And I received a phone call about 3 weeks ago from Jane Williams at the FDA specifically on this. So very grateful for her and her team's help. A lot of times they don't get the credit they deserve. So this will be a $175 million project for us, and we very much rely on our partnerships with Gresham, the City of Portland, to be able to pull these things off. The Southwest Corridor, we have now achieved through our regional partnership, through Metro's coordinating the first step, a locally preferred alternative. We've agreed just literally this week with all the elected officials who are on our steering committee that I chair, particularly for that tricky Bonita to Bridgeport section. We now have within the LPA, you've seen lots of media attention on that. We now have agreement from the region as to how to manage that. There'll be many more things to come that come with a multi-billion-dollar project such as this. The red line often understated and not known about. This is a $200 million project for us, something I sure saw when I first arrived at TriMet. The red line is actually holding back all of the rail lines in this region. We have single track to the airport, and we need to liberate that and the aerial spaghetti, I call it, at Gateway. With it also will be an expansion out to Fairplex, and that'll include another over approximately 30 rail cars. So we need to go bigger and faster. We also need this as a precursor so we can unlock the potential when the Southwest Corridor arrives at the Steel Bridge. So because that becomes part of the overall network for us. So we need to unlock the network and speed it up, particularly when you think back to all the people that are going to be coming to this region. We need to change the rules. Enhanced transit corridors, yes, not only for rail, but buses we also must speed up as well. And in fact, over the last couple of years, we have moved, even on public infrastructure, our on-time performance from 81% to approximately 87 to 88% now. The train system has moved from 75% on-time performance for a whole month. It is now tracking just under 92%. We are rewiring TriMet and how we deliver our services, but there's a lot more that has to come. I'd also, as we talk about the expansion side, I really would want to double down on not disregarding the importance of a state of good repair. There are many transit agencies before us who've disregarded it at great peril, including death and accident. We are not going to be one of those agencies. We are rewiring and we are rechanging. We are changing the infrastructure as we go right now, including rail cars, including rail lines. In fact, some of our rail lines are about 40, coming up on 40 years old. The agency itself is changing. We've been a building agency. Now we need to be a rebuilding and building agency, and that is a different culture and different muscle that our team is evolving in right now. We are also, for our first time in our history, going to be contracting out full refurbishment of our midlife rebuilds of our rail cars. We have been a component rebuilder, but not a major rebuilder, and that contract was just awarded to Siemens for the first time in our history to actually take care of that work. That's a big step for us. In terms of the innovation side of things, the world's definitely changing here, and it is so for TriMet. I'll give you an example of an e-bus relationship we have. We've started, and I just want to give PGE credit, specifically my counterpart, Maria Pope. Deserves a lot of credit. We've been working, our leadership teams, very closely as to how we bring the talents of each, the competencies, the gifts, the infrastructure of each. As an example, we are rebuilding our Powell garage for about $100 million. It served its life cycle. But we're going to be, on East County, we're going to be electrifying that garage. And PGE is going to be paying for it. They're going to be paying not just putting the transformer at the gate, they're going to be putting the transformer to synergize within the community, but also lay the wiring out and take care of the wiring for the future and the power charging equipment. We're looking at new models and new ways to do things that help the taxpayer optimize their investment and the related return we need that a PGE in fact requires. We will be converting our non-diesel fleet buses by 2040 or before. We do not have the full funding for this. I have said to our own team, this is a management challenge, what we need to figure out, but not a reason to stop and to go. Our first battery electric buses are being tested now. We expect 5 more federally from the electric buses later this year. With funding from HB 2017, over the next 5 to 6 years, we anticipate having up to 80 electric buses in our fleet operating in the region. We are also laying this out in an equitable form. For example, East County is getting the first electrified facility. I've also been rebalancing our portfolio and not having all the tired old diesel buses in one part of the community or another. I've rebalanced the fleet to ensure equity across this region for the emission side of things in the short term till we get to the longer term solution for all. HB 17, as I've mentioned, funds won't be sufficient enough for us to complete the bus conversion, but we will need to work with the legislature and others in other creative ways to help bridge the gap, including also working with partnerships and other innovations with our bus suppliers to maybe we have to recycle the existing buses and electrify some of those for the future use, knowing you've got life cycle costing that's a benefit on it even when you buy the bus. But I believe because of the less wear and tear, you may open a new recycling mindset of recycling existing buses because they're very different wear tear parts. You don't have transmissions, things of that nature. We are actually starting pilot projects and taking some risk with this right now with a Midwest manufacturer. This has not been done in the industry before. So again, compliment to PGE. Without that partnership, these are the kinds of discussions we're having, including wind, as you may have seen in the newspaper. We now have turbines on Tillicum Bridge. We have our first line that's actually fully 100% wind powered, a dedicated line, and we're trying to look trying to reinvent innovation in our own mindset to leverage the gifts that this great place has. We've also introduced our innovation with Uber, Lyft, bike share, car2go, walking, biking, streetcar, and transit all in one app. We're pioneering. In fact, we were just part of a global announcement as a global strategic partner with Tim Cook's announcement at Apple recently, you may have seen. In fact, our Hop card was on their global webpage as the marketing tool for it. You will stay tuned. There'll be some other announcements out probably in the next few weeks related to strategic relationship that TriMet has, in fact, with Apple, extremely senior levels. Very exciting. We are going to need to integrate the services for our customer, not just provide them independently. There's a lot of complexity, in my opinion, having been in the public service business and the customer business my whole life. There are too many points of friction, I call it, between bus handoffs and train handoffs and schedule and weather. We need to help use technology like never before to integrate, to simplify, to plan, book, and pay. And that's where we're trying to go. The technology does not exist yet, but we've just launched an app that allows us to pilot this. If you can book TriMet to a car2go, for example, or TriMet to a scooter. The goal is to get to a fully integrated palette of all those where the customer just scrolls, clicks, confirms, go. We're also exploring loyalty programs. Most people have a loyalty card of some kind. This industry has never really pursued that. I think there's a tremendous opportunity if we think the right construct is there for a loyalty program to use it for also not just loyalty, but also transportation demand management tools to reward service problems, but also shape demand when you may have to avoid capital in the future. Yield management, the airlines might refer to it as. As you can tell, I'm being told to turn back a page here. Oh yes, thank you. As I've said, we also believe our cost structure needs to be addressed. The industry I've worked in other industries. As you start to see the potential of the Ubers and the Lyfts by taking the drivers out of the vehicle, well, that's about 70% of their cost structure. So you start to compare with there's a cost structure potential shift, I believe, long-term coming, not in the short term, particularly around the driverless world. I was fortunate to run the largest driverless train system in the world. I was running trains 108 seconds between trains, 85 seconds between trains during the Olympic Games in Vancouver, BC. It's possible. We're partnering with some global partners right now on actually learning what the journey for driverless and even on buses and or trains need to look like. But we'll draft likely behind the automotive industry. We don't sell enough bus units as an industry or train units as an industry. The automotive industry does. They're testing, for example, right now, a driverless streetcar in service in Germany as we speak. So that world will have impacts, I suggest, not just for the TNCs, but I suggest also long-term for the structure of how we actually deliver our own services. So we will become 100% transit accessible. I've spoken to mayors and other elected officials. Please do not ask TriMet to put a bus stop down in a grassy field anymore. If we do, we need to have a discussion around how we partner to build the sidewalks, the amenities, the lighting. For me, that is the cornerstone of equity for people who can't even get on a bus. So TriMet will become a champion in this, particularly in some of the secondary markets where we're trying to shape and serve. Enhanced transit corridors, really crucial for us to speed up this region, not only for a discussion of Ballot 2020, which is really important for this region, but I'd also suggest, as I mentioned to President Lynn Peterson at Metro, we need a conversation on what policies that government of all levels has that need to be changed to allow those investments to sweat the assets. I think there's a tremendous opportunity, whether it start at queue jumper lanes, HOV lanes, transit signal priority, all the way down to the engineering checklists, engineering teams that I've overseen before, that if you have a water main break, what is the plan to mediate cycling, walking, and transit to keep it going? After all, I believe strongly people will stay in the car if we don't tilt the playing field of policy to give advantage to cycling, walking, and transit in the future. Finally, the last comment I'd make, and happy to answer any questions you may have, is we are very much very supportive of ODOT's efforts, particularly in the area of congestion pricing. And as that moves forward, look forward to seeing the pricing analysis and the eventual implementation. As we look at other parts of the world, it's one of the key strategic instruments for balancing consumption and shaping proper behavior. We need to do that in a responsible and an equitable manner that doesn't penalize people in cases of hardship. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, do you have? No. Questions? Well, go right ahead. Yep.
You turn this on. So, thank you very much, Doug. A very good presentation, and I'm impressed with the agenda you're pursuing and the pace at which you're pursuing it, and all of the elements you discussed today. I wanted to just take a minute to thank you for being involved personally in our director search effort. It's important for us to get outreach to many players and interested parties, and appreciated your taking the time to do that. You know, a lot of these things that you're talking about with respect to innovation and seeing the future are things that in our own realm we've been talking about as well, as recently as this morning. So the collaboration is important to make sure we're not only figuring out what our respective agencies are doing, but also how we can work together to be efficient and share ideas and make sure that the seams between our systems are seamless, not problems or impediments. So that's a very important thing to continue to work on, and I know we all want to make sure that we are building partnerships and communication and working closely together wherever we need to, and imagining a future that is as transportation seamless as we can make it. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to come down here and talk to us. You know, we would certainly return the favor whenever you're interested, having us before your board. So we should keep thinking about ways to actively interact.
Great comments. Thank you. I might comment on the seamless side. On our smart card program, what we're doing, we're already started outreach to other cities like Seattle, Honolulu, and others, I'll call the willing, where they maybe have not evolved into the smart card world. There's a significant part for those who have rail connections to airports to connect our cities together. And so we have started, and actually Salt Lake is on that list as well, start discussions around how you can take Alaska Airlines or the airline of your choice from PDX to Seattle, from the train to the train on the other side. We start looking at intercity mobility. So to the seamlessness, not only within our region, we're trying to even look extra region. Even having conversations around, as an industry, around cost structure. Our cities don't compete. In the industry, I believe, and I say this having worked in other industries like the oil industry, I actually think we need to start synergizing some of our cost structures, our IT centers. We don't compete. There's common servers, there's all kinds of things, same phone systems. How do you do those things to position the cost structure so we can actually do more with less dollars attached to the unit output that we produce?
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Doug for coming down here and making the trip and providing this presentation for the commission. I've had the luxury of getting to know Doug over the past couple of years in his new capacity as GM to replace Neil and all the great work he's done. And I'm very encouraged and inspired by the direction Doug is adamantly wanting to take TriMet in. And as you just heard, I'm just thinking about things more holistically and always making a note to address the ROI for the public tax dollar to make things more efficient. And I think that's really prudent to moving forward. And it just shows, it's a testament to his character as a leader. And I know you come from much larger urban communities and other sectors, but I think we definitely, as a partner agency, I definitely think we're going to have a lot of opportunity in the future to make some transformations around mobility in the urban community. And as we deal with congestion going forward, we're fully aware through that process that a lot of the community stakeholders have indicated that transit obviously is going to be a very important tool and resource that we use in order to maximize mobility in the urban core, but also minimize congestion on our highway system. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for the partnership. Very critical.
And I think it outlines the conversations that we've been having about leveraging our funds and resources. And as we look at transit-oriented development and looking at ways that the land use system is impacting communities, this partnership is critical to that success. And so lean on us as well when you have opportunities for grant funds or different things that are maybe not funds from us, obviously, but the federal government in terms of their investment in ways in which we can enhance your system. We can be a resource to be able to provide letters of support or other engagement opportunities to support those efforts. And so really encouraged also by the investment in new technology. And as we have new funds coming in the state of Oregon, but at the same time we have disruptions within that system and new ways to think about how we are implementing our services. So grateful to have your involvement and partnership and really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you all.
Yes. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have an update on the cost of services study from the DMV division.
I'm going to defer some of my time to Lindsay because I know she has a...
Okay, wonderful. Lindsay, come on down. That was great. I'm not sure if it's $20 or a box of cookies or what's it. Excellent. Yes. Ms. Baker,
Good
the floor is
afternoon,
yours.
Chair Vaney, members of the Commission. For the record, Lindsay Baker, ODOT Government Relations. Thank you very much for the last-minute switch. I have to be in the Capitol at 2:30, so I appreciate you giving me a little bit more buffer between. So as has been the case previous months during this legislative session, I come up and I just sort of talk as fast as I can at you for 15 minutes. I will do that again today. Please feel free to interrupt and jump in if ever I'm glossing over anything that you want to spend a little bit more time on.
Do feel free to breathe if necessary. And
I have no time right now. I'm just kidding. So we're at the sort of end run towards the end of legislative session. So you'll recall the constitutional sine die date is June 30th this year. The legislature is very interested and has set their target date at June 20th. Yesterday's revenue forecast really marked the let's get out of the building, right? So we've got 6 weeks left. We're starting to see big budget bills passing through the building. Big packages, revenue package finally passed earlier this week, the K-12 education reform. As well as a lot of our chamber deadlines. So May 10th, which was last Friday, was the last day for bills to be posted in the second chamber for a work session. So this means every Senate bill that's in the House and every House bill that's in the Senate had to be posted on an agenda to get worked by the end of the month. By May the 24th is the last date at which bills can be moved out of their second chamber policy committee and headed to the floor. We've also started to see both the House and the Senate have daily floor sessions, double daily floor sessions. The House was on the floor this morning at 9 in the morning, got off the floor about 11:30. So there's a lot of time being spent just doing the normal paperwork movement through the session to get bills churning. So a couple sort of by the numbers. As of today, we've had about 2,740 bills introduced. After that first chamber deadline, about 1,600 of them were still alive, and ODOT is tracking about 550 as of today. The Joint Committee on Transportation, which is one of those committees that was subject to that second chamber deadline, so all of the bills in that committee had to be posted by last Friday, and we've been doing work sessions fast and furious this week and then into next week as well. So I'm just going to run through some of the bills that we've been tracking really closely in the Joint Committee on Transportation, some of which were agency bills, and then obviously we are heavily engaged in a lot of the bills that are going through that committee. So Senate Bill 59 was a bill that the agency introduced into the process. This was the Connect Oregon placeholder bill. This was pretty high level. It just said the legislature shall allocate, and it had a blank number for in the event that they wanted to give us some more money for Connect Oregon. You'll recall that in the 2017 legislative session in the package, the legislature dedicated 4 different projects to come out of the Connect Oregon program. So there was not a competitive process for the 2017-19 biennium. And a lot of our stakeholders have been very interested in having another influx of funding, often their lottery bonds, so that we can run a competitive program. So the Joint Committee on Transportation will be moving that bill from the Joint Committee to the Committee on Ways and Means, putting a $50 million in that blank. The governor's budget invested $20 million. I have heard, and this is, I guess, somewhat on the record now, but not official, but I've heard that the Joint Committee might be interested in putting between 25 and 30 million. So more to come on where that number lands, but I'm feeling semi-confident at this point that we will get additional lottery funds this session. House Bill 2592 is the placeholder bill that is representing the Technical Corrections Package Fix bill. So the committee will recall that the Department of Transportation did introduce Senate Bill 58 into the process, which was our sort of opening salvo. Here's all of the provisions that we want. But very similar to the 2018 session, the legislature decided to have all of the different little amendments and provisions put into one omnibus package fix measure, which is House Bill 2592. This is also posted for a work session next Monday. We just had our first hearing on this bill last Wednesday. Director Garrett was before the committee sort of running through all the different provisions that are included in that bill and our agency amendments. I think we've got 12 or I think 13 provisions in total. Most importantly, that we have highlighted and spent the most time talking about, obviously, is the OTC conflict of interest provisions. In addition, the provision relating to the least cost contracting fix for that Section 45 conditional increase or conditional increase report, and then the relationship between the OTC and the CIAC. So those are sort of the three most important provisions that we get out of this session with. And as of today, I think we're looking very confident and everyone is feeling really good about including those in the package. So that's that one. The next bill I'll talk a little bit about is House Bill 2770. So this is a bill that Representative Susan McLean has brought forward that was really a product of the Autonomous Vehicle Task Force. You'll recall in the 2018 session, the legislature passed House Bill 4063, which established ODOT or designated ODOT as the lead agency for AV work, right, in this emerging technology space, and also created a task force. I think it had 31 members, which is quite a big group to manage. 31 members staffed by the Department of Transportation that would look at what legislative changes, what statutory changes might be necessary as we continue to see progress in this space. So House Bill 2770 was an outcome of that work group process. It had won a first hearing a couple of weeks ago. I believe there's been some amendments, and I think people are feeling fairly good about it. It really just establishes a mandatory testing space and a registration process for companies that are wanting to test this technology in the state of Oregon. Next bill I'll talk about is House Bill 2881. This bill was brought forward by the Road User Fee Task Force. Again, similar to the AV Task Force, ODOT staffs it. ODOT does manage what's called the RUC, Road Use Charging Program, here at ODOT right now. And this really does a bunch of sort of administrative fixes to really just make the program a little bit better, right? So it reduces it eliminates the cap of the number of vehicles that can participate. It ties the rate to the fuels tax, particularly contemplating the subsequent fuels tax increases that will take place over the next 6 years. It does a lot of little housekeeping measures to just make it a little bit better and stronger of a program. That's also posted for a work session next Monday, and we expect it to go through the process without any opposition. One bill that I don't believe I've talked much about with you before is House Bill 3213. This is a bill that we have been working on with Representative Bosshart Davis and some local government folks, particularly from the Association of Oregon Counties and then Marion County in particular. So what this bill does is it establishes, or what it will do via amendment, is it establishes a pilot program to allow counties to establish safety corridors on county roads. So right now, ODOT has a safety corridor program, but it really is specific and exclusive to state highways. There's a bunch of different criteria that must be evaluated, must be met before a road can be designated as a safety corridor, and then certain investments that must flow with that designation. So there's been interest from counties, particularly Marion County, in doing this on one of their local facilities. So I think the committee was quite receptive to this idea and this concept generally, but really wanted to sort of see proof of concept before we allow every county to do it across the state, right? And so we have been working closely with Representative Bosshart Davis, Representative Ron Noble from the Joint Committee, as well as representatives from law enforcement and the counties on how can we sort of narrowly tailor this, how can we make sure that we're measuring the right thing, we're reporting back, seeing whether this is effective and efficient before we take it out statewide. That bill is posted for a work session next Monday, and again, I expect that to go pretty smooth. Next bill is Senate Bill 558. So recall that we have been having lots of conversations this legislative session about speed setting. So talking about how do we manage speeds that are those statutory speeds, and also how do we set speeds for that, what's under sort of the basic rule speed setting methodology. Paul Mather has been working on that roundtable group with local government representatives, I think starting back last fall, which was really trying to inform conversations that we would likely be having this legislative session. The City of Portland, as well as League of Oregon Cities, have introduced 4 bills in total: Senate Bill 558, 559, 560, and then House Bill 2702, which do various things. There was a lot of conversation this session with joint committee members about, well, if ODOT is having this roundtable process, might we see that conclude and some resolution there before we start changing statute? And I think that's sort of the consensus. So of all of those 4 bills, the one bill that is moving forward is Senate Bill 558. What this bill does is it takes sort of the example of what the city of Portland was able to do 2 or 3 sessions ago, which is every place where there is a statutory 25 miles per hour zone, which are often residential roads, they are allowed to independently, by act of city council, reduce that to 20 miles per hour. So previously this was only the city of Portland is allowed to do this thing, and in Senate Bill 558, it's now allowing every city across the state to be allowed to do 25 to 20 miles per hour. So that's all Senate Bill 558 does, and that will be moving forward on Monday. Next bill is Senate Bill 1021. This is the final bill that is posted for work session on Monday. What this bill does and will do via amendment is direct the Department of Transportation to perform a cost to complete on the I-5 Boone Bridge project. So there's been a lot of conversation this session, particularly with members from the Clackamas County, sort of Westland, Tualatin, Wilsonville area about what can we do to make some progress on this project. And so this bill will direct ODOT to perform a cost to complete, and we'll have to report back to the legislature February of 2021 on how much it would take to actually see the project through construction. Maybe I'll just pause and take a breath there. Any questions so far? Nothing? Okay, I'll keep going. So the next thing, so those are all the bills that are in the joint committee, and then we've been obviously tracking bills that are outside of the joint committee as well. A few highlights here. So ODOT's budget, I expect, will move in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Everything is looking generally current service level, no big red flags as of right now. House Bill 3023, we've spent a little bit of time talking about. This is the bill that would have ODOT be regulating TNCs, so Uber, Lyft, ride-sharing apps. This bill made its way out of the House Committee on Business and Labor and has been sitting in the House Committee on Revenue for the past 2 or 3 weeks. We continue to engage with House Revenue Committee members. The city of Portland has been quite active and quite vocal in this space, as well as obviously Lyft and Uber. So we continue to work through that process, really just making it clear that we fully intend, or if we are designated and directed to establish a program, we fully intend to regulate this industry. So that's kind of where it is now. There's no date yet set for a work session. Recall that the House Committee on Revenue is one of those committees that is not subject to a posting deadline, so they could move that bill anytime without having any of those normal paperwork requirements. House Bill 2007 is a bill that I've spent a little bit of time also talking about. This is a clean diesel bill. Recall that ODOT's interest and engagement in this bill is sort of threefold. So one, the regulatory and sort of enforcement agency over what this new space would look like. What the proponents and sponsors' intent is really in phasing out older diesel engines over time. So setting 2029 as the sort of phase out date. And having all of the medium duty, so that 14 to 26,000 pound vehicle class, as well as the heavy duty, so anything over 26,000 pounds, be 2006 or 2009, respectively, or newer by 2029. Because the sort of trigger of enforcement is an inability to get registration, that is how it's sort of the regulation and enforcement falls on ODOT. So that's one way in which we're impacted. The second way is really our fleet management. So we have a lot of vehicles across ODOT's fleet that would be captured within this new program. And then finally, the third sort of component of this measure is the clean diesel contracting. So the way that the bill is currently structured, It would say that for all public improvements to 279C contracts that are executed by a state contracting agency valued at over $20 million would be required to have clean diesel contract specifications sort of baked into that contract. So what that really means is 80% of the on-site fleet has to be clean diesel, so that model year or newer. We're sort of still working with proponents and industry, for that matter, on what that right date of implementation and effectiveness looks like, and we'll continue to have those conversations. This bill was moved from the House Committee on Energy and Environment a few weeks ago, down to the House Committee on Rules, and then just yesterday afternoon moved out of the House Committee on Rules down to the Committee on Ways and Means. So we'll look forward to, I think, continuing both the policy and also that fiscal, what does the resourcing of the agency look like with this new program, both of those conversations simultaneously as we look to the finish line.
Lindsay, real quick, you said the threshold would be 2029, but you said the years would be between 2006 and 2009, or you were trying to decide, or they're still trying to decide if it's going to be 2006 as a cutoff or 2009 as a cutoff?
Yeah, Chair Boehne, Commissioner Simpson, so the way that the bill is currently drafted, by 2029, every medium duty, so that 14 to 26, would have to be 2000, I believe it's 2007 or newer. And then by that same 2029 deadline, every heavy over 26,000 would have to be 2010 or newer.
Okay.
I might be wrong about those dates because we've been obviously spending
you are
a lot
right.
of time,
I
that's...
understand the emissions. I was just
Yep.
curious what you meant by that.
Yeah, and then the other thing I might mention on that point is that for all of those registration requirements, they are tri-county only. So Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah, if you have registration in those tri-county, then you are subject to this new requirement. If you are out of that tri-county area, then it's business as usual for you. Okay, next bill I will talk about is House Bill 2020. So this is the carbon bill. So as you know, we continue to stay very engaged with both members of the Carbon Reduction Committee as well as the Governor's Carbon Policy Office and our Transportation Policy Advisor, because so much of this program, I think, is going to be an ODOT program. We've been really trying to inform that conversation, all sort of ranging from what would the nuts and bolts of administration look like, all the way to how the funds might actually be used at the end of the day. Really procedurally, I think right now, the bill has been sitting in the Joint Committee on Carbon Reduction. There have been numerous amendments, actually the most amendments I've ever seen on a single measure as long as I've been working in the legislature. I think we're up to -94s right now, and it is posted right now for a work session tomorrow afternoon. I expect that tomorrow afternoon the committee will adopt those amendments and move the bill down to Ways and Means. We'll continue to have a conversation, again, both a policy and I think a fiscal conversation in the Ways and Means Committee as well. And then the last bill I will talk about very briefly is House Bill 3440. So this bill was just introduced this morning by Speaker Kotek. I'm not sure if anybody has seen the coverage yet this morning, but this is that bill. So at a very, very high level, having not spent a lot of time talking about it or really even reading it, the way that it is structured is it would take half of the amount of the kicker, which is about $750 million. It would do two things. It would, one, fund $260 million to complete the I-205 Abernathy Bridge seismic and widening project. It would also establish two separate funds, a clean diesel fund and then also a low and no emission vehicle fund. Even those would be evenly funded, with the remainder, which would be about $250 million apiece. So that was quite big news this morning, and particularly since all of the crux of that funding is focused on the transportation sector. We will continue, obviously, to engage with the Speaker's office and members of both chambers on how we can best inform and then manage those funds were they to come to the agency. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. So that's pretty much it for me. Happy to answer any questions if you have any, please.
So on that last bill, the 250 and the 250, so what are the parameters of those expenditures? What's the focus?
Sure. So the clean diesel fund, my understanding, Chairman Brocklin, is that it would be really targeted towards helping out businesses comply with the clean diesel requirements established in House Bill 2007. So both on the fleet retrofit repower replacement side, and also on the clean diesel contracting side. So and that's one. I think the second fund, which is the low and no emission vehicle, would be, I would expect, and the bill is a little bit vague on this point, and I would expect a lot of this would be left to the rulemaking process. But I think it would be really targeted not so much to the fleet investments as much as it is the EV infrastructure investments. That has been a significant point of conversation this session in lots of different spaces. But that really, how do we get the charging network out there? How do we get it online? How do we make it robust enough so that people really want to make that transition to an EV vehicle? I think that's really where the conversation is going.
Just one follow-up. So I on that last piece, the investment in the electrification system, for lack of a better phrase, are they looking statewide? Because I'm thinking about this in terms of particularly Highway 97 as our kind of seismic safety valve, aorta valve, line. If we have when we have a large seismic event, I hope, if that were to happen 20 years from now and we haven't put the investment in on the east side to the road that may be operable, and we have a much different mix of vehicles, that would be a problem. So I hope we're looking that far out on this to really, it's not just the I-5 corridor, it's really, it's 58, it's 26, and it's 96. You've got to get those roads to allow people to move around, just generally, but particularly if we're in a position where we're operating from the east of the mountains west. So no discussion on that yet. It's too early to know the specifics.
Chair Boehne, Vice Chair Van Bachlen, I think that there's been a significant amount of discussion, actually. I'm not sure that discussion has taken place in the Capitol building. I think that's much more of a detailed level. What they're interested in, frankly, is how can we jumpstart the industry? How can we get the network online? When we move to a conversation about where are we placing it, what type of charges are we placing, who's actually doing the administration, that kind of thing. In my mind, that is much more of an implementation conversation. But I also think, point taken, and I expect that there are people that are thinking about exactly that thing. The one thing I would point to maybe, or perhaps offer for consideration, is a lot of the work that the governor's office has been leading on the Executive Order 1721 implementation, and particularly the interagency working group, and then the Oregon Solutions process, which I think is directed at exactly what I think I'm hearing you say. How do we map out what that future network looks like? Where do we need to be making the investment? Where do we need to be making the sort of phase 1 versus phase 2 investment? And I think a lot of that work has been kind of happening a little bit ad hoc over the years, and I think is finally starting to be a more concerted and more coordinated effort recently. So I would say I think we're feeling optimistic that those conversations are happening and that they will inform if $240 million are made available. I think those conversations will absolutely inform how those resources are spent.
Is that going to be ODOT rulemaking?
So the way that the bill is currently structured is it would have the fund being administered by the Department of Administrative Services in consultation with ODOT, DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, and the Department of Energy, which all actually are the 4 agencies that are on that interagency working group that I referenced a moment ago, because we all have sort of different roles and responsibilities in that overall space, but those are really the 4 agencies taking a pretty deeper dive into it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And I just was taking a quick glance at it. Looks like there's a lot of detail in 3440. One caution, do we know on the project piece that the funds are enough to be able to complete the project, or to be able, you mentioned the $260 million that was put forward. So as we've maybe noted in House Bill 2017, some of the numbers that we had given, especially if House Bill 2020 goes forward, are we certain that the numbers that we are giving will be enough to be able to meet those obligations down the road? And I don't, having not read it or knowing all the details, just as a point of making sure that we're refreshing our numbers that we're giving to make sure that they are realistic to today's realities, given some of the other legislative changes that are coming online?
Chair Boehne, absolutely.
Okay.
So I think we've been in close communication with the Speaker's office as well as members of the Joint Committee on what are those numbers actually look like, understanding that, you know, the final construction cost when everything is said and done is going to be a little bit different.
Right.
But we build that buffer in, right? Or Highway builds that buffer in when they are scoping out their projects. But I think we are confident that the $260 million will get us that package. I will draw a distinction between the full I-205 project, which includes the Abernathy Bridge widening and seismic work, that package A, versus the lane widening from Stafford to 213, that 6-mile stretch, right?
Very good.
So the $260 million that's included in 3440 really just contemplates that first package, which is that bridge work and not the lane work.
Okay.
So just
very
to
good.
keep in mind.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. It does. Please.
In the discussions about clean diesel, has there been any mention of marine industrial retrofit or short line rail locomotive retrofit?
Chair Boehne, Commissioner Calorie, no, because those would not, I believe, be captured within the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Go forth and do great things.
Thank you very much.
As you have been. Really thrilled that you're there. All right. Mr. McClellan, please. DMV. Speaking of funds and bills and all
Speaking of
those great
funds.
things, how's Oliver?
Yeah, doing great.
Good.
Doing great. Yeah, we're stabilizing still, but it's going quite well. So, Chair Boehne, members of the commission, my name is Tom McClellan. I'm the DMV administrator. And I think you have a copy of our full report. What I want to do is give you a quick kind of overview of that report. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that it takes a lot of people to put this kind of a study together and a lot of time, work involved to do this kind of analysis and then do a report that's succinct so it makes some sense to people. And I would like to formally, publicly recognize our senior fiscal analyst, Andrea McCausland, who is sitting right behind me, who did the lion's share of this work. And so thank you to her for that work. So, do I have something to advance, or are you going to advance it for me? Oh, there it is. Okay, not fully equipped. So what I want to cover today is a little bit of background. This is not the first study we've done of this kind. Talk about the cost analysis and methodology, and the change that we made for this particular report. Focus on some key findings from it, and then what the future will hold for us in doing these studies in the future. So just generally overview of our fees. Almost all of them are set in statute, which means we need the legislature to approve those types of changes. We have a few that are administrative rule that we can change through public processes, but very few can be changed by ourselves. We need the legislature to buy into those types of changes. Our fees are also predominantly defined in the Constitution as a highway fund type of revenue. So there are restrictions on the use of those funds. Things like inflation, changes to our business processes, the growth in the state and central government assessments that we pay that are largely revenue transfers that we really treat as a cost to us because the revenue is flowing out for some other purpose. And then new federal and state requirements, they alter the costs over time of what it takes us to deliver our services. Our fees support basically three main purposes as defined in Oregon revised statutes. We cover our direct and administrative costs for delivering services. We provide funding for transportation infrastructure, for largely debt service, the payment of those bonds you talked about earlier today, and then generate revenue for the state's highway fund, including disbursements to local governments and for highway and roadway type purposes. So generally speaking, those are the three things we do. Decisions, fee increase history here, decisions have been made by the legislature to increase our fees over the last 18 to 20 years, but none of those were for cost recovery purposes. And that's a key point I'd like to instill upon you, that even though millions of dollars are being collected by DMV, they are technically dedicated for certain purposes. If you go back to 2001, in 2002, you had OTIA 1 and 2. Those passed, $71.2 million was estimated from DMV fees to support those activities. And principal and interest on bonds was primarily what our fees were being dedicated to. So fees were increased for a purpose of some kind. It wasn't really for our costs as an organization. 2003, it was OTIA 3. Increased our vehicle title and registration fees to repay bonds again, to repair city and county bridges throughout the state. Increased VIN inspection costs. Our drive testing fees were created at that time. Commercial driver license fees, instruction permits, and salvage title fees. All these were increased with revenues intended, maybe not dedicated specifically in the statute, but when those calculations were done, what the intent was, it was for those other purposes, not for our operations at DMV.
And Tom, if I may, I really want us to hang on that for a quick moment, because we will often hear, but we gave DMV, from a legislative perspective, X amount over the last X amount of years. And I think if we don't mind that down a bit and take a look at where those investments were made, then it's not telling the story about how we're supporting our Department of Motor Vehicles. So that piece for the commission going forward, as we talk about increases, which are always difficult, because that means that someone else is paying for that, that's a user fee. It's not necessarily going to be able to cover the cost because we're behind already in but we've been increasing the fund. So anyway, just, I'll leave it at that, but something that the commission will need to be able to support the department on.
Appreciate that, thank you. 2009 was the Jobs and Transportation Act, JTA. Increased vehicle title and registration fees again, plate fees, trip permit fees. Those revenues, about $24 million per year for ODOT for long-range planning, $3 million per year for the Oregon Travel Information Council at the time for rest area support, maintenance. And then the remainder was split 50% ODOT, 30% counties, and 20% for cities. It also increased the identification card, the ID card fees that we collect for specifically public transit funding. So a lot of that funding and that ID card that we issue is now going to public transit support. Then you get to House Bill 2017. You're very familiar with that bill, obviously. But again, vehicle registration fees and title fees were increased. Trip permit fees were increased. Also, the privilege tax and use tax, which really we don't collect, but it also was imposed. And then we have future increases in our fees that are built into that bill that take effect in January of 2020, 2022, and 2024. And for a total of about 40% increase over the period of time from when House Bill 2017 starts until it's fully implemented. Our fees in those areas are going to go up by about 40%. The next phase includes fee increases based on MPG ratings of those vehicles. That's a new thing for us to do. We've never done that before. It may be the only place in the country where that's being done. I haven't heard of any other state that actually does that. The forecasted revenue in the next biennium, 2019 to 21, is an increase of $224 million, and then $272 million in the next biennium after that. So we are raising more revenue, but again, for a specific purpose other than our costs, the costs of operating a DMV. There was also a small bill in House Bill in this 2018 session that adjusted a few of our driver and business regulation fees, mostly there around consistency. The argument we made there is we're charging different fees for similar type services, and so we brought forward a set of fees to try to standardize them to be more consistent. Some of the fees had 50 cents after them, $23.50. We proposed rounding up. Legislature rounded down. But at least they got them to a solid dollar number instead of with pennies that we're dealing with. So that was a progress, I guess, from our perspective. Cost recovery expectations, our fees are set in statute, required the legislative approval to change them. And what we try to demonstrate is that our fees are no longer fully recovering their costs in every area across the organization. Some are far exceeding their costs, and that's the title and registration, primarily on the vehicle side of our organization, as well they should. That was the intent when the legislature raised those fees. Past studies, this is the third update that we've done, a study. The first one was published in September of 2013, and largely the results have not changed in that period of time, as we've done this every couple of years. We did an update in June of 2015, December of 2016, and then this study. In the past, we looked at in the rearview mirror as far as our transactions, and then tried to forecast that out into future transactions and a future budget. This particular report is based on the actual volume of transactions and our costs in the previous biennium. So we looked back at the 2015-17 period, a full 24 months, used that information for our forecasting and for our analysis. That was the first time we did that. primarily because we're in the midst, as you just mentioned, the service transformation program. We're changing the way we do our business. And rather than try to apply new timings, which we really don't have, on how long it takes to issue a title or something, different services, we decided to look back. And I think actually, I think the results are very similar to what we would have gotten had we not had this big change that we're undergoing today. Let's see. Our operating costs, like I think I did mention, we include the state government, central government assessments. These are revenue transfers. They've tended over time to increase faster than our revenues have as well, which to me, the net result of that is less money for local governments being passed forward because we are spending more on those types of activities that support us, but those have grown faster than we have actually. And then some of the cost drivers, and I mentioned it here in a later slide, but credit and debit cards. We've been accepting those for about 2.5 years. New technology for us. The cost to process those credit card payments is continuing to grow. It's about 1.5% to 2% per transaction for the cost that we're collecting. And as the fees go up, so do the merchant fees. Right now, we're about $250,000 a month in those merchant fees. That's money that we're using to process those payments, and it's continuing to grow. So some key findings. Overall, the vehicle fees are subsidizing our driver programs. You can see the specifics actually in the study itself. The base operating fees, and that's a term that we've just kind of coined, the base fee, that's before all the other increases for the other purposes. The base fees have remained very stagnant over time and really are no longer fully recovering the costs they were intended to recover. We plan to prepare a legislative concept later this fall to recommend some fee increases to largely address the disparities that we see in this study. So that can be considered as part of our budget development process for the next biennium. We need to get this issue, I think, into the forefront. I've used the analogy of the frog in the water where you turn the heat up slowly and the frog never jumps out. It's just over time, all these increases have happened, but now and seeing all this revenue being available and collected by our agency, by DMV, but not really realizing that base fee, that core fee, has never really risen. And there's no inflationary increase built in to the statutory fees that we're required to collect. So as we look ahead, the next report will be more challenging because we will have 6 months with our new vehicle system. As we look even further out, we'll have a new driver system in July of next year. And so that will also change our costs of operation, the way our business processes are going to change. The biggest driver in our costs is our staff time, the time that we spend on different transactions. So the more we can do online services, the less expensive it's going to be for us to deliver services. That's one of our key strategies going forward. But it does have an impact on our cost analysis that we do. To me, the good thing is we now have a baseline. We've done it with current systems and processes, transaction timings that we've had over time, and now we can do a comparison as we go forward. In the future, what's it going to cost to produce a title? How much is it going to cost to do a driver license and the various other services that we provide? So I think it'll be instructive as we go forward to be able to look at new studies compared to what we've done the last few years. So with that, that's really what I wanted to share with you today.
Yes, please.
Hold on a sec. Sorry. Tom, thanks for that. I was curious about, if you have any thoughts about the future of actual, walk-in DMV facilities and what that'll mean for the department given all of its different facilities and infrastructure that it has around the state.
Chair Boehne, Commissioner Simpson, that's a great question. We've had a lot of good conversations internally about what the future DMV should look like. We anticipate a lot more self-service capabilities, whether that's online today from your home. I'd love to get to the point where we have kiosks that people can, just like a candy machine, dispenser. You go up to the machine, you push some buttons, you put your credit card in, and out pops your registration tags and your registration card. And there's a lot of other services that you can do and other states are doing. And those don't have to be in a DMV office. Those can be any place that people are. TriMet, potentially. I was listening to 100 million people, 100 million trips or whatever. Those are the types of things you need to do to make your DMV services more ubiquitous, more available to people where they are and where they want to do the service. It really depends on how well people are able to adapt to that type of a service approach. But it could definitely have a big impact on the size of our offices, the location of our offices, the flow within those offices as well. Then you add the effect of technology and automated vehicles, for example, and the driver licensing process could be quite different. It could become an operator's license at that point, where we turn the vehicle loose to do its thing. You know, what do you need to know about operating a vehicle if it operates itself? So the number of people that need a driver's license. Are we going to have more vehicles or fewer vehicles in the future with the TNCs that are out there today? Don't know the answer to that question. Are we going to see an increase in titles issued or far fewer issued in the future? There's a lot of interesting things happening right now that will affect our business that is hard to predict very far.
It's getting on a flight, and a 7-year-old son was asking a question as to, like, why do you have an ID card? Like, isn't it on your phone or something? And then I'm just like, I was like, wow, because, you know, you scan in at the airport now, the kiosk with your phone typically, unless you want to print paper. But, I mean, yeah, it's just like those kind of interesting conversations to be thinking about, I guess, as it relates to, do we start developing our own app as an agency, and then, you know, people just electronically show their card? I mean, I don't know. I just didn't know if those types of conversations that you guys are having
Chair
internally.
Boehner, Commissioner Simpson, the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, or AMVA, I've mentioned here before. All of us are, the DMVs are members of this in the U.S. and Canada. They just issued some standards around electronic driver's licenses. There's been a lot of work actually in this field within this country and in other countries as well, with just exactly what you're talking about, the driving privilege and everything that is part of that card today being embedded in your smartphone. And how do you protect that? How do you pass that information to an officer at the side of the road if they pull you over? They're working through that, and it's not that far away actually as potentially being feasible. It's changing.
Yeah. Well, please.
Question. I know that you talked about the cost of the service charges processing fee for debit cards, and I think a lot of times people forget there's also costs to writing checks. So there's a processing fee there along with cash handling and trying to deal with that. And I'd kind of be interested in knowing, is there one piece that's better than the other?
Yeah.
So do you move away from a model of not accepting any cash, not accepting, you know, and only going with the debit card, but then there's problems with people that are unbanked and don't use debit
Absolutely.
or credit?
Yeah. Chair Boehner, Commissioner Brown, we accept cash, checks, credit, and debit card today. And I think now with the scanners we have in the offices, you can actually hold your phone up like to make an Apple Pay, you know, donation to DMV. But so we're definitely going that direction. The argument I've made with the legislature as far as the debit and credit card and the merchant fees is that it should be a cost of doing business. It's more efficient for us. It's definitely a convenience for the public to be able to pay with a card. And they want to pay with a card. But the thing is, you got to raise your fees. If it's going to be a cost of doing business, your fee has to go up too. Right. What you charge everybody, whether they use the credit card or not, ought to be higher. And that's my argument, that as we do the study, it becomes even more apparent that we're not recovering our costs with the fees that we charge. And that's a choice. That's a public policy type choice of whether you accept a credit card or not, or whether you charge a service fee or a convenience fee to those individuals who choose that particular payment option.
It's a challenge. I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront, please.
Yeah, so Tom, just one comment with respect to the performance of your group, so at DMV. So I had to, on Monday, get my driver's license renewed, and I didn't have to have it done on Monday, but I wasn't up against the deadline, but I just was thinking about it, and I was near a DMV, so but I was pretty late in the afternoon by the time I got there off of the meeting I was in. This was the Gladstone DMV.
I think I know where this story's going.
And I would just say that two things. Thing one, and the main thing is that there were a lot of people in there at 4:35 when I arrived for a 5 p.m. closing. So I knew I was on thin ice already. And my number was way down the list. And so I just filled out the remaining paperwork I needed to fill out and sat down. And the way that your team handled that group that was in there, managed through in a really organized way. They kind of, it looked like appointed one woman among them to be the interface with the community and the customers. Just really terrific, every single person. I was the second to the last person out, but they went through, I think this is right, they went through 30 people, served 30 people in 60 minutes, which was just impressive. And since I was number 29 of the 30, I got to see how that whole last hour went, and you know, people were in. I would say on the customer side, there was some impatience. There was, you know, people had other things to do, and they kept everyone informed. They worked through it in a really excellent way, and they served all 30 of us, roughly 30 of us, efficiently and pleasantly, and
That's great.
there were no outbursts. So that's thing one. That's 95% of my comment.
Okay.
I do think you should check the camera at Gladstone DMV, because when I got my photo, I just couldn't believe that they had captured my youth and vigor properly with that device. So, and I'm not saying that it's happening in all of the offices, but that, I would say that one camera in that one office, I think you should have somebody up there double check it, because I was stunned with the image that I was looking at as I walked out the door. And finally I was able to rationalize it, because I was in a boot and on crutches. So I'm just going to chalk it up to my foot injury.
There you go.
And I'm blaming a lot of stuff right now on my foot injury, so it's just being added on. But that camera may be old,
We'll
so
check.
please,
We'll
check it out.
Well,
I actually think it's brand new, really.
I need to offer that I too just renewed my license, and I
you know, a picture of youth over here in comparison.
so well. I just want to really acknowledge the honesty of your team as well, because my story is that I went into the Bend DMV and it was an hour and 24-minute wait, and so I got online and looked at Redmond and drove to Redmond. And one of the pieces that, as I was listening to the encounters of individuals, as we talk about the digital age and being able to be on a kiosk, that personal interaction for many who were coming in from out of state, who had different experiences with different states, that personal connection was really critical to help them get to from here to there.
Yeah.
So not only did the delightful woman, first of all, I didn't have a license. I had lost it and I needed to renew it anyway, and so I used my ODOT photo. It's the only one I had. I don't go to Costco. And so, and I waited in line, my same thing. And she said, "Oh, your photo's much better than mine," and on and on. And I thought, well, this is going well. And then she said, "Is your weight the same as on your," which for the, so, which, but
don't
then
have lie
I
detectors.
I didn't want to say that, quite frankly, I've never been 5'3", but I've been 5'2", so I left it at 5'3". However, when we take the photo, and I kid you not, I said, "How did it turn out?" And she said, "It's a 6."
Boom.
And so I too would like you to look at the camera in Redmond. So, but delightful interactions,
Great.
kind and fun people. Just with every type of challenge that comes in a customer service realm. So please give the kudos to the team and do check the cameras.
Yeah, and I will say, I did not mention that I was a member of the commission. I just thought, I'll just sit back and see how they
Just
do
do
on
it.
this.
Me
And
too.
just, I'm
Yeah,
just,
me too.
you know, regular, which on a good day I am just kind of regular person. And I was just very impressed. And they did question me on saying I was 5'2", but they fixed that.
You're
They
5'3"
fixed that
now.
for me. They had a, you know, there is that measuring thing right at the door, and they just shoved me over there and said, not shoved me, encouraged me to go over there, and said, no, you're a little taller than that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Our employees work very, very hard, as you recognize, and but wait times have been higher than we're used to the last couple of months, actually. And that wears people down after a while. And, you know, just hearing you guys talk about this, we'll definitely share that.
Thank
But
you.
it affects morale after time when, you know, those people who show up at 4:30 on a day when you close at 5, and you know you're not leaving at 5. You're there till 6 or sometimes later to close down the office. That's our commitment. If you're in the door at 5 o'clock, that's why we shut off some of the knowledge testing before that, because we want to give people plenty of time, but we also don't want our employees staying until 7. So it's one of those people that shows up. Yeah, I had my hair cut last night, and the barber actually was talking about people who came in, you know, 5 to 10 minutes before closing time. They obviously never have worked in a service industry.
Sure, sure.
Well, I
Same-
have, and
same
I still
story.
did it. So I think it's just a tribute. And they got through all of those folks in an hour, and they closed it up at 20 minutes to 6, which I realize is not 5, but
Yeah.
it's not 6:30.
That's true.
So.
Great. Thank
So
you.
our kudos to the team and great job.
Great, thank you.
All right, we are running a little bit behind. Next, we have the update on the director's search.
So we'll pick up time here.
Okay.
So we are at a inflection point in the director search process. We've been doing a lot of outreach and a lot of listening. The contract, which Chair Bainey and Brendan Finn and others negotiated with Korn Ferry, called for us to have outreach to at least 40 people. It turns out we have since early April, and by we I mean Korn Ferry and particularly Charlie Ingersoll, who is our point person, and Christina Fisher have outreach to approximately 100 people. So Charlie has told me that it is the most extensive outreach of any search he's done in his career, and he's been doing this for a long time. So I feel really good, and I pushed them very hard to reach far and wide, and we've done that. We have also had a couple of opportunities for people to comment through posting of documents in the public process, and we have had comments in both cases from a number of people. So I think our outreach has been very strong, and that's according to our expert consultant who does this for a living. So we are now at the point where we, as a result of that outreach, Korn Ferry has developed a position description, which is in your materials and which I'm proposing, subject to someone making a motion, that we adopt, we approve, so that we can post it, not just on ODOT, but a set of posting places where we would post that are primarily transportation organizations at a national level to allow us to have the kind of outreach that we want to have across the country. So that's the first request, is approval of the proposed position description for the director. The second thing, just very quickly, is we have memos in your materials, both from Korn Ferry and from the department, from ODOT HR director, that lay out a protocol for dealing with confidentiality of candidates who want information to be confidential. We are subject, of course, to Oregon Open Meetings Law and Open Records Law, but within the parameters of those laws, we want to give the candidate an option, so it's kind of a check the box, to keep their information confidential to the extent we can within the ambit of the law, and still, in order to encourage people to compete who might not otherwise. So this is really an effort to encourage broad candidate development, because we are moving from outreach and job description into identifying candidates, vetting candidates, interviewing candidates, ultimately selecting a candidate to serve as our next director. So you'll find all that material in there, and so what I'm asking for today is, one, approval of the proposed position description, and two, approval of the process that's laid out with respect to confidentiality protocol for candidates.
So let's take the job description first. Has everyone had an opportunity? Please, go right ahead.
This is a question actually for Commissioner Van Brocklin. On
Doesn't have to do with DMV relicensing? No? Okay. All right.
6-5.
well, I won't tell you about my experience.
Yeah, okay.
On I guess it's page 3, on the description of our next director.
Yeah.
At the very first line, I would like to propose that the word manage be deleted and the word lead be put in there.
So you're page 3, pardon me?
On the Corn Ferry.
Okay.
Lead.
Because
He's page 3 of the description.
Here or here? Here, manage.
Yep.
You're proposing, Commissioner?
to eliminate the word manage and insert the word lead. And the reason I'm saying that is much of the rest of the text talks about leadership.
Great.
I don't have any objection at all to that, unless others do. I mean, I
That's
don't.
great. Perfect. Other comments?
No, the others are minor. I found a place where I think it said under the Oregon Transportation Commission and ODOT, page 2, last paragraph on the page, including responsibility over state highways and bridges, motor vehicles, transportation safety. Then it puts marine transportation, and I don't see where our interplay is with marine transportation. And that's not specific to the description of the job, but I just felt that was a...
So I was under the impression, maybe false, that we had some...
The Marine Board
Yeah.
interaction, planning, yeah.
Marine planning, not transportation. You okay with
Sure.
that change? Okay, planning. Okay? Is that it?
Yeah, the rest are just little, the spelling.
Wordsmithing?
Okay.
Wordsmithing.
Travis Browering.
Well, I was always accused of that at the port. No, we gotta, you know.
You have a good partner in crime.
Yeah,
Commissioner Simpson,
that's
any
great, Commissioner. Thank you for
additional
raising
comments?
those changes. Others?
Commissioner Brown? Okay, if not, welcome a motion. And will there be other edits, Commissioner Callery? Do you feel that there are things, scrivener's errors or any other things that you would want to propose?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One other.
Okay.
Page 5.
Yep.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bullet number 6.
Yep.
The commitment to traffic congestion reduction through usage taxes. I mean, are we looking at tolls as a tax?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's fees.
I think fees is a little more.
User fees is a good idea.
User fees instead of usage taxes. Okay, that's a good change.
Done.
Okay,
Done.
I would welcome a motion with those edits.
Are we making a motion just on that initial?
Just on this piece, on the job description, so that we can get that forwarded.
Great, Madam Chair, with that,
I move to approve the draft ODOT Director position description.
As amended?
As amended.
Excellent.
As amended.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So the confidentiality piece, I think, is an important one, but also, as noted by Sheriff Van Brocklin, we are to observe and obviously honor Oregon Public Meetings laws. And in Oregon, there are, we value transparency in a way that other states and for individuals coming into this state may not truly recognize. And so I think that we want to be open about the realities of that, but also do what we can to provide confidentiality within that law. And so are there any further questions or comments or concerns about that we need to talk through?
So I think the operative language is in the memo from Charlie Ingersoll on page 2, which I know he conferred with Bonnie Heichon. And so, as you'll see, there are 2 boxes to choose as a candidate. The second one is that you're submitting with the understanding that your written materials be subject to disclosure under the Oregon Public Records Law. The longer paragraph says that you request that your written materials, you're submitting them on the condition that their materials be kept, that those materials be kept confidential to the extent legally permitted under Oregon Public Records Law. And then this is actually language we worked on afterwards because we want to make sure people were aware of how the public meetings law works as well. So there's a note there to candidates if they check box 1 or space 1, that it is likely that in the latter stages of the search, finalists for the director position will participate in 1 or more meetings that are open to the public under Oregon law. At that point, their candidacy may become public knowledge. In effect, it will become public knowledge. And so that is our kind of flagging for candidates, that even though they've checked box 1, that when we get to a public meeting, if they're participating in it as a candidate, they've waived all of this is subject to the law, right? So they're not in any position, even if they check box 1, to say, well, you said you would keep this protected, because we're only agreeing to keep it protected to the extent we can, and that runs up against what the law allows. But we also say in that second sentence that that when you're in a meeting that's a public meeting, separate from the public records, that in a public meeting setting, I mean, in this meeting, you could come in and talk to us as a candidate. You're in a public setting, and people are going to know at that point, so you will no longer have an expectation of confidentiality in a public meeting setting. And the fact you're a candidate, if you've kept it quiet, will be disclosed at that moment. And the last thing I'd say about this is we're trying to encourage people to apply that want some level of comfort. So if they go out in the early stages and all we've done is accepted their materials, and there's no public, we're within the contours of the law, that we would keep that quiet. And why would we keep that quiet? We would keep it quiet because they asked us to, and secondly, they probably asked us to because they have an existing job and they don't want their existing employer to know that they're looking at an alternative position with another employer. So we want to respect that to the extent we can in those situations. And maybe some of the most competitive candidates would be candidates who would want that level of assurance. So if they went out early in the process, they really wouldn't want their employer to know they'd even been in the process.
But they would be informed that at some point.
Yeah, and I think the sentence does that. It's
Yeah.
saying, we can only protect you within confines of the law, and we can only protect you. It's both public records and public meeting. I think that second sentence is saying, you're in a public meeting, you're in a public meeting. And if you're identified as a candidate for director of ODOT, whoever is there, if it's being broadcast, if it's being reported by a print journalist, if it's something that people start talking about, oh, I didn't know, Neil Goldschmidt was trying to be director, that might get out somewhere. So you want to be able to notify them, so that's the reason for the note. So I think that it's adequate disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Anything further?
Nothing further from me.
All right. Thank you
Oh,
for you.
maybe Bonnie.
Oh, yes. Okay. Great.
Bonnie may have something.
Go ahead and.
Oh, yeah, I thought we were going to do that.
Okay.
I thought we were going to kind of.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But you said
Okay.
nothing more, I thought.
Well, I wasn't sure if we needed to take
Yeah,
action. I
we
mean,
do
it's
need to take
inherent in
action.
our
Yeah,
role.
thank you.
But if we're, okay, so we will be,
I think we're endorsing this approach.
Okay, very
That's
good.
outlined in these memos.
okay, very good. So
In
it
a
would
form
be,
on the record decision
okay.
to take the approach outlined in these two letters.
Okay, so I hear that as a motion.
That's a
So
motion.
it sounds as though we would be taking it we'd be supportive as outlined in the memo.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership. Okay,
Thank you, Bonnie.
we're like a herd of turtles today. Next, an update on the ongoing work on project delivery. Our refresh of taking a look at how we deliver projects in Oregon and commitment to continuously improve and build upon the work that's been done for decades, and here we are. So who's driving? Mr. Strickler? Or? Okay,
That's right.
excellent. Floor is yours.
Did I get this on? I did.
Looks like a dream team.
Okay. Chair Bainey, members of the commission, thank you. Chris Strickler, Highway Division Administrator. You took most of the intro, which is perfect because that's what we were hoping for, that we've had significant dialogue around the project development and project improvement processes that we've been working on. What you have in front of you, we've called it a few things, a placemat, a roadmap. The roadmap probably fits the pun a little bit better. But this is really our kind of guiding draft document that we've been working off of that really kind of outlines the process that we've been embarking on for the last several months. Several months ago, you heard from me that we wanted to take a look at our project development process, and we wanted to look at opportunities to really invigorate new tools into the process, really bring some other expertise from outside sources into our work products, and really provide what we'd like to say in the end is probably better cost estimates earlier in the process, better definition of scope, and better definition of our schedule so that there's a higher level of confidence much earlier in the process so that by the time we get to the end, frankly, we have more available STIP revenues to then fund other projects, those types of things. That's the goal in the end. Mr. Lind and I, and I'll let him introduce himself, we will spend time talking about the upper half of the chart that you see in front of you. And then David Kim and Tamara Clark are here to talk through some of the details and the major plan elements of the improvement processes that we've been under for the last several months. And we'll leave plenty of time for questions. So I think sum total will be about 15 minutes or so amongst the four of us, and then leave opportunity for question. And certainly you can have some of that time back if you'd like. So Mr. Lind.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bainey, members of the Commission, Macman, Deputy Highway Division Administrator, as Chris was mentioning. So the top half is really our work plan that has been underway for a couple months now. I will note that we went to the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee, Chair Bainey, Commissioner Van Brocklin, I think both got to see this once before. The effort that's underway right now, if we look at the three orange bars kind of in that middle of the page, we are currently in the process of revalidating the named House Bill 2017 project. So Chair Bainey, you had a question for Ms. Baker earlier, very much in line with the work that we've been doing to ensure that all of those named projects or earmarked projects, that we have a defined scope and budget and schedule for each of those projects. So as we come back next month, that's one of the things we're certainly going to speak to and daylight where are we at in the delivery of all 40-ish of those projects. The second bar is our current STIP, the 1821 STIP. It's about 300 plus projects that are currently still in motion. Our regions are actively engaged in reassessing each one of those projects to ensure scope, schedule, budget, and bring you what we're commonly referring to a Travis Browering effect, Commissioner Simpson, of the Omnibus Amendment. To capture all the changes that may need to take place as we look at what are the market conditions that we're experiencing, what scope changes have we wanted to take, and rather than bring each of those individually to you, that we look at the entire portfolio of those last 2.5 years of the STIP and bring them to you at once. So that's going to be a fairly comprehensive document we bring to you in June. We'll do some work to summarize it in terms of what kind of scope, schedule, budget changes are we requesting to make as we look to deliver the rest of that portfolio. And then the last orange bar really leads into, so how are we doing building the next STIP? So we talked a little bit this morning in the investment workshop about your decisions to invest in the Fix-It programs. As we look to identify projects specifically to use those funds, how are we doing to assign scope, schedule, budget to those projects? One of the factors I think that we're really looking for is a portfolio view. And some of our asphalt paving contractors in particular have noticed that we tend to do a cycle. Every other year is up and down in terms of how much product we're asking to put on the ground. So that's one of the measures we'll be looking at to balance our portfolio, not only for our contracting community, but also for the geographical differences that we have across the state, putting work out each summer. So lots of things in motion. It's going to be a heavy lift as we bring those back to you in June, so next month.
So then the last thing that I'll say prior to turning it over to Mr. Kevin, Ms. Clark, to go through the details of the work plan that they've been pulling together to really kind of refine these efforts is that this product that you have in front of you is reflective of some of the work that we talked about at the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee before. And we anticipate that we're going to continue talking about some of these levels of work, whether that be a watch list for projects as they start to come forward and we see risks that might be identified there, or kind of an ongoing reporting tool that brings the projects into a statewide reporting mechanism, whereas historically we've had kind of the regions really supply their own reporting mechanisms. So trying to bring some of that consistency, and then whether or not it's working. So we want to have that conversation with both the Commission and the CIAC so that we can determine whether or not it's hitting the mark.
There you go.
Oh, great. Chair Bainey, members of the Commission, I'm David Kim, the statewide project delivery manager, and we're excited to be here today to share our project delivery work plan. This work plan has been a culmination of work over the last year as a state project delivery branch has been formed. And what I thought I'd do is provide a little context as to some of the work that's been in flight, and then I'll have Tamara speak to some of the efforts that are planned. So over the past year, we have formed a new branch called the Statewide Project Delivery Branch. And the purpose of this branch is really to support the regions in delivery of the STIP projects. And what we've seen over the years is that there's been strong support for construction. So all things construction, there's a one-stop shop under Joe Squire's leadership as a state construction engineer. And on the engineering and technical services side, there's been a one-stop shop for all things technical and engineering and support for engineers throughout the state under the leadership of Steve Cooley, chief engineer. What we haven't had is a one-stop shop for all things project development. So for that world of scoping through bid opening, there isn't a one-stop shop. And so what we've done is created a new section called the project development section under Tamara's leadership. And that section is really going to provide support to the people, process, policies, tools, and operations to really support the project development side of our portfolio. That section will consist of a project management office, also known in the industry as a PMO. We'll have a project controls office, a tech and data unit, and a programs development unit. And really, this work plan is going to help inform the future shaping of what's within each of those units. The second aspect that's been in flight over the last year, and there's been tremendous momentum, I think it's really brought the regions together, is what we're calling our Project Development Improvement Initiative. And this initiative is really to establish a standard of practice for how we develop projects. What we've done is established a standardized template for project charters, and we've created a new change management request process and introduced 2 new phase gates. And phase gates are a check-in point where we assess the scope, schedule, budget, risk, and readiness to proceed of a project. In our current project delivery process, we only have 1 phase gate, and that's at PS&E, final plans, specs, and estimates. And we feel that introducing additional phase gates will help inform the agency of managing risk. And are these projects ready to go, rather than coming to the commission at the last minute, at the nth hour, to say we have a cost overrun or a schedule slip with a project. The efforts of this work will result in improved accountability, transparency, and efficiency of ODOT's project development process. And as we worked on these initiatives, it wasn't just ODOT staff and managers, we also engaged our ACEC industry partners. And there's been a tremendous level of effort that's been undertaken. And again, this work was rolled out yesterday. And so we expect that it will pay huge dividends on so many fronts in really elevating project management as a discipline within ODOT. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Tamara Clark now.
There we go. Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, my name is Tamara Clark. I have a long history with project development and project delivery in the Portland metro area for ODOT Region 1, and I am very pleased to have an opportunity to bring that experience forward into the new project development manager position for the agency, a position that's brand new. With the creation of the project development section, we have assessed and prioritized some of these work efforts and recognize that there is some immediacy to the needs that we are finding for project delivery in the regions that we'd like to address. For that, we would like to stand up a project risk management task force, a project cost estimating task force, a project scheduling task force, and a quality oversight and reporting program. For those task forces, we'd like to comprise those of subject matter experts, process improvement specialists, communications professionals, and representatives from all 5 regions. And our intent is to complete white papers and recommendations to help decide the future of the project development section within just 2 months. So we're looking for those groups to meet on a pretty aggressive schedule and to develop their reports and provide not only recommendations, but templates and tools that we can actually launch in August. For that effort, I'm going to quickly outline what the expectation is of each of those. For risk management, we feel that that's certainly an important component of project management. And while we have risk assessments of every project and have always done that for ODOT, what we're finding is we don't have a formal program. There are other states that have had tremendous success with formal project risk management programs. Those programs provide scoping level qualitative risk assessments, quantitative risk assessments with the application of probability metrics, cost risk assessments, and cost estimate validation processes depending on the size of the project and the complexity of the risks involved. Our risk task force will review the best practices in other states and within the agency. And with support from WSDOT, we will consider the thresholds that might be applied and whether or not it's appropriate to stand up a formal risk management program for the agency. We feel that there is a likelihood that as a result of that task force that we will have an expectation of a a risk management paper template for each project with further consideration of the cost estimate worksheet that would be associated with those risks. For our cost estimating task force, we also recognize that that's absolutely critical to the work that we do from a number of perspectives. For the project development section as a whole to provide support for cost estimates in general, for region project delivery certainly, and for development of the STIP. We don't have a central project cost estimating unit to support those efforts today, and we therefore don't have a formal program to support scoping level estimates, alternatives analysis estimates, project preliminary engineering estimates, project construction estimates, or STIP programming estimates. We, for example, do not have a formal program to consider what inflation factors we should be using and whether or not they vary by project or by region. We would therefore like to initiate that task force to review systems for data collection and analysis of project market trends for labor and materials costs, for inflation rates, and to build standardized templates to ensure that all project costs are identified, documented, and reviewed. Preliminary tools are expected to be made available in August, together with recommendations for standing up a cost estimating team in the project development section. We expect that both the project management, risk management, and project cost estimating teams will work very closely together to standardize the forms and formats and procedures that we apply to these efforts moving forward. On receipt of the tools and recommendations from these task forces, we also expect to initiate a scoping task force. We intend to gather the lessons learned from our most recent scoping efforts for the 21-24 STIP, build and apply those lessons learned to in association with the risk management and cost estimating tools that we will be receiving from the task forces to develop a scoping program for the agency. We also don't have a formal scoping program today. The third project-specific task force that we would be forming would be on scheduling. We find today that we do not have reliable schedules. It's critically important that we have reliable schedules and that we baseline those schedules and use that information for progress reporting for projects. For so many of our stakeholder efforts as well as our own efforts, OPO relies on the scheduling information that we provide to resource, as does the Department of Justice and ACEC and AGC partners. We find that with the number of new employees, the sheer number of new employees we have in project management in the system today in ODOT, that we are not keeping up with the training for our MS project scheduling program for them in both building schedules and just using the tool. And we find that they are not generally keeping those schedules up to date in real time, which makes it very difficult to report out on that data. It's critically important, therefore, that we have a task force that includes all 5 regions, that we hear from the regions, and that we move forward with methods, templates, training, and other tools to help our region project managers in the field of scheduling. Lastly, I just want to touch on quality reviews. It's critically important that we have quality assurance and quality control for all of the products that we supply through the agency. And all of the efforts that we've talked about today, that the intention to launch the task forces as well as the project delivery improvement initiatives, templates, tools, processes, and procedures, and just standing up the project development section, we want to have an overarching control program, quality control program. And it is our intention with development of the new section to begin to define that quality program and to ensure that it is applied to all of the work that we do. Thank you.
So Chair Benny, members of the Commission, completing the work plan elements, we have the geotech program review. We've been before the Commission before to provide an update. Work is well underway, and I'm happy to say that we will begin recruiting for a state geotechnical engineer here in the next few weeks. And then the bridge program plan. So we've had some challenges with our bridge program, and the state bridge discipline is one of the few disciplines with a centralized delivery model where that function is actually provided out of headquarters. ODOT, we're going to be undertaking a bottoms-up and top-down review of the bridge program to assess the effectiveness and efficiency of the program management and decision-making, resourcing, competency, organizational structure, communications, coordination, and funding strategies. We'll be leveraging FHWA and other DOTs as resources. Bottom line, we're taking a look at the mirror, and as with our strategic plan, we're looking at the past, current state, and what the vision is for the bridge program moving forward. And we're going to use a geoprofessional review as a model for helping inform the recommendations and implementation plan. Lastly, as Chris alluded to, the statewide project progress reporting tool. I'm really excited about this. So I look at ODOT and we have a lot of data. We're wealthy. We generate a lot of information on projects. And what we're finding is that within the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years, we have very mature data systems as it relates to HR and as it relates to financial systems. But what we don't have today is a robust database for project delivery. We have a lot of lagging indicators, but we don't leverage the database or data warehouse for leading indicators. And our hope is that we'll be able to establish reports that will generate real-time project information and metrics so that our project managers, our area managers, our management staff can take a look at the health of projects and generate dashboards that have red, yellow, greens and be much more proactive in addressing schedule issues or budget issues. And if you look on page 10 of your report, there's an actual demonstration report that we're going to start sharing with the regions today. These are the possibilities. And one critical aspect of the data warehouse is really the one source of truth. And so rather than sending information out to regions, say, fill in these blanks, we'll be providing the information. It's check the information, see if it's right or wrong. And it's not just value to the project managers, but it's value to the agency in terms of establishing new performance measures in the project delivery realm. And so we believe that these elements identified in the work plan are foundational to strengthening ODOT's project delivery and positioning us to really take on the increased workload that is going to play out over the next several years. So with that, thank you.
So Chair Baney, that's the quick summary of the project improvement processes that we have in place right now, or starting to put in place. And we anticipate, as you see on the graphic, many of those tools being available by August. I don't want to shortchange, though, a few of them that, frankly, we've already had some introductory offerings of those tools in place already. And that is some initial risk-based estimating as it relates to some of the smaller projects. We've had some templates prepared from some of the staff within the agency. So we're really trying to hit many of these things in real time, but then also get closer to that kind of that finite tool by the time the next step rolls around. So you'll see some of those improvements employed as we look at the revalidation and the recalibration of the existing step and the current step cycle. But you should see them much closer to it. I'll fall short of saying perfection, but you'll see the tool in a much better place to be utilized across all the disciplines within the division for the next step.
Do you have questions or comments? I would like to say this is really critical to our success. And when we have the ability to reflect on what we've done in the past and how can we improve that going forward, and we take that opportunity and move with it, that tells me a lot about the team and about the organization as a whole. So thank you for embracing this as a way of doing business. Tamara, you had mentioned our partners, AGC, ACEC. We own this system together. We can't do it alone, and we need to make sure that we are transparent about how we're making decisions and that we're trying to get to answers quickly, but also in a meaningful way to where we're not risk adverse, but we're not taking on additional risk where we don't need to as well. So thank you for the overview and for the update on what you're doing. It sounds like a tremendous amount of work, and I suspect that cultural shift too of what we had done and what we need to be doing in the future is not lost on us. So thank you for your leadership in this way. Any other? Okay. Thank you. Yes. All right. Mr. Havik, not to miss an opportunity to come before the commission and give us yet another update, but I will take a quick moment and just say that as noted last month, the opportunity that we were given through House Bill 2017 and the ability to invest in intermodal facilities and capital expenditures in the state is a gift. And the commission takes that very seriously and wants to make sure that we make the best decision with the best information possible. And so to our partners and to you and the team, thank you for your patience in helping to get us information so that we can be informed in making those good decisions. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Chair Baney, thank you very much. We have a great team behind us, and again, we're doing our best to bring you the information to help inform your decision. For the record, again, Eric Hovig, I'm the planning section manager for ODOT. And again, wouldn't miss another opportunity to come give you a monthly update of where we're at. Last month in April, gave you an update based upon a series of questions that we had provided to each of the project sponsors. Those questions had two parts to them. There was a series of questions that they needed to answer around kind of their operations and rail car availability, as well as facility operator. Those questions and responses were due back to ODOT on April 23rd. I'm happy to report that all project sponsors submitted those materials to us, and we have done our review internal, and they are currently being reviewed as well by the Tioga Group. The second part of the questions was really around the rail service and the service plan and getting a letter from the appropriate railroad. Union Pacific in most of the cases, but also Burlington Northern when we're talking about the Brooks project. And those letters were due to ODOT on May 3rd. We heard from the project sponsors and specifically also at the same time from Union Pacific Railroad, who've really been a good partner with us, that was just not going to be feasible within their business analysis process. And that's what we'd asked them to complete, is look at the materials from the project sponsors and the shippers and the commodities and where all those commodities are going to be going to and from, and can you develop a service plan in your business analysis to potentially serve these facilities. And that's what we've heard back from the railroad, is that they needed a little bit more time. Once we sat down both with Union Pacific, who again sat at the table with us to talk about when they could provide those letters, and as well as sit down with our project sponsors, and we set a new due date for those letters to be completed by June 3rd. And in early conversations with Melissa Meyer, who's really my point of contact with Union Pacific, they're very confident they can have their letters dealt with by that time. In the meantime, ODOT has also reached out to the Burlington Northern Railroad, because they're very integral into serving the Brooks facility, just to see where they're going to be at timelines, and we're still hopeful that we'll get something from Burlington Northern within this time frame as well. These letters, I think, are very critical because they really help define, is there a demand, is there something within the service plan for the railroad where they can devise a service that will handle the kind of volumes and commodities, as well as the frequency and destinations that might be shipped through these facilities. So the second part of this, I mentioned at the April meeting, there's a second part to that business analysis that we wanted to make sure we completed. And that was, once we had an understanding from the railroad around the type of services being provided, then engaging with the shippers to see if that service was actually going to meet their needs and be a functional service for them. It was my understanding at the time that that was really going to be led by the railroad, and as we've evolved through the process, I've learned that that process really is not led by the railroad, but the project sponsors are now responsible for meeting with the shippers or the potential shippers through these facilities to ascertain. You now see the service plan from the railroad. You have an idea of what kind of the rates might be. These are not locked in, but kind of approximate ranges where we have them. Is that going to be still a functional service for you? Would you use this kind of service over taking just trucking or other types of delivery models? So that will also be due to the department by this June 3rd deadline. We've asked the project sponsors to engage their potential shippers based upon those railroad letters and those pieces of information around asking that question of the shipper viability. Those will really form, I think, the final piece of the information that we can bring to you for your decision. And we're really looking to bring that information to you in June. And I think we'll be able to make that deadline with the June 3rd materials coming to ODOT. We'll be able to turn those around and provide that to you. What we anticipate in your packet of materials will be not quite as full as what we gave you back in February, so you don't have as much paper, but you will be getting all of the responses from the project sponsors to those April 23rd deadline questions, copies of the letters from the railroad entities, as well as documentation of the engagement from the project sponsors with their potential shippers. At the same time, we will have updated memos from our Tioga group. As you recall, Tioga was our third-party reviewer that was taking an independent perspective to all of this information. They're going to be factoring that in with everything received to date, plus the new information, And does that change any of their recommendations or perspectives or even advice maybe to the commission about how to move the projects forward? So we'll have revised information from the Tiger Group as well. And then finally, your commission packet will include some information related to your decision framework. Back in last month, we talked about a decision framework about how the commission would take a stepwise approach to get to an answer around a specific project proposal. And so the third part of that step was a matrix of some key attributes and questions. Staff have gone through, we've started to develop our responses to those. We're fine-tuning them as we speak. We've been working with the Oregon Business Development Division or Department as well to get their perspective. And that will be part of your packet as a final product of how we see from multiple staff's perspectives the different values in around these project sponsors' proposals. And then if there's any additional material, we'll provide that as well. But that's what we're anticipating. Again, your decision in June, I think, will be an important one. We're really reaching the point. I don't think there's any more rocks we can turn over to find information without putting a lot more time and money into the process to move these projects further along. So this will really form the basis of the information you have available to you for that decision. And your decision will come down to, do you accept or not accept a specific project proposal? That's the action out of the statute that you'll have to take. If you get to a point of saying, yes, we approve a specific project plan and proposal moving forward, the next step will be to enter into an agreement with those accepted project plan project sponsors. And given the conversation we had back in February, we heard very clearly both from Director Garrett's recommendations and the discussion we had about taking that incremental approach. So how do we make sure we develop an agreement with our project sponsors that build in the right kind of milestones and steps and checks along the way to make sure we're still seeing the right kind of progress towards viable and successful projects in the outcome. So thinking through those milestones, we've been working with our Department of Justice, and after some early conversations with you, we kind of see about 3 key check-in steps that we just want to make sure we kind of lay out. These are not in detail. These are very high level, but want to make sure we're clear to project sponsors and others that we will have an incremental approach to these agreements. The first is, given that we're not going to get quite the level of commitment from the railroad letters that we'd all like to see at this point in time, and we understand their process, as well as the shippers, we see kind of an interim step before we get to the final completion with the railroads and an industry track agreement and a right of entry. So we want to have some sort of check-in kind of at a midpoint to say, are we still on progress? Do we have the design approvals necessary? Have we kind of looked at the design issues and kind of come in and do that check and balance to make sure we're still worthy of moving forward? The next milestone is where we'd actually finally get that process complete, get to that industry track agreement, the right of entry agreement from the railroad. And this is where we want to also at this point in time follow, I think, the advice from the Tioga Group that they really laid out in February. When we actually have actual numbers and we have agreements with operators of the facility, we have real agreements with the railroad and rates established, rerun that economic analysis and let's make sure we compare, here's the actuals of how the facility would operate and there's various costs to make sure this is still going to be a viable entity moving forward. So we see that as kind of a checks and balance in the milestones as well. At that point, then we can maybe think about releasing money for the right-of-way phase to go out and purchase that. And at the same time, let the project sponsors finish out any final permitting and other approvals they need to do prior to construction. So we kind of see a stepwise incremental approach to help manage that process going forward and put some controls and check-ins back with the commission to make sure we're still on board with the viability of these projects. So that's what we see forward for the June meeting and for moving forward into a potential agreement phase. And at this point in time, I'll entertain any questions.
There we have a commissioner that's yes.
Make sure Commissioner Callery's okay.
Yes. Well, thank you. And what I really appreciate also is that you've been able to encapsulate the comments that we've brought forward and the concerns and really helped so that we can make a decision. So I like how you've laid this out in terms of the next steps. And I also appreciate the transparency that it won't be, so here you go. There will be some stage gates, if you will, in making sure that the process makes sense going forward. So additional comments or questions? I think, so a lot of information has come about in sections. Should we contact you if we want to sit down and kind of go over all of it? How much time do you think we're going to have committed? I mean, obviously, we're in charge of the agenda. We can carve out as much as necessary, but maybe we have an offline conversation about how we make sure that we really distill that down to commissioner involvement between now and then, obviously, as individuals, not collectively, but then making sure that we have enough time in June to really dialogue about the decision and get to a decision. So thoughts on that?
A few thoughts,
Okay.
Chair Bainey. Definitely, you can reach out to me. We can talk about kind of what that process looks like. At a very high level, I think we need to provide some time for the Tiger Group to come in with their reassessment and help explain what they're seeing moving forward. I think they bring a valuable perspective and experience around these facilities that, honestly, our staff just doesn't have that same level of experience. So getting that real world knowledge and experience on the table, give you a chance to ask them any critical questions you think have not been asked or answered. That's a great opportunity to really dive in and say, where do we need to understand? What are we missing? What else do we need to think about asking to make sure that we're comfortable moving forward with the decision? So we'll have an opportunity for that. Again, this has been a transparent process. Back in February, we provided an opportunity for the project sponsors. Probably need to think about another short opportunity for them to come in. They're going to be seeing this information as well. So new recommendations from Tioga Group. We're going to have the spreadsheet and our ratings and scoring. It'll give them a chance to make sure that they feel that they've adequately portrayed their information, or if there's something that may have been missed in those analysis, for them to portray that to you and get that information to help inform your decision. And then really, I think it's just really, it'll be up to Director Garrett and myself. We'll help walk you through that decision framework kind of step by step to make sure you're comfortable each way along the way in making that decision wherever it leads to, whether it's a yes or a no. Okay. Did that answer that question?
Absolutely. And I just want to really impress upon my colleagues that if you feel like you'd like to sit down and have an additional day or questions that you want to have asked, any of that, I would just avail the team to make that happen. And I know that you will. We want to be able to be as informed as possible. And this is a big decision, and one in which we don't take lightly, as noted. So we want to make sure that you all have what you need in order to feel ready. Okay.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Director Garrett?
Madam Chair, we will take the consent calendar item up in 3 separate actions. So first, what I'd like to do is focus in on consent calendar item number 3, pull that forward, and then from that, pull forward 2 files that it is my understanding that the Vice Chair has some conflict with, as his law firm represents. File number 99375-004, Patricia Lee Helmig, and file number 9493-001, TriMet. So at this time, Madam Chair, I would ask the Commission's approval for those 2 specific files, and I'd like to affirm at this time that Vice Chair Van Broeklen will recuse himself.
That's correct.
Okay. I would welcome a motion as outlined by the director. A simple so moved would suffice.
So moved.
Okay, excellent. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And
Madam Chair, at this,
Okay.
well, I apologize.
It's all right.
I
You're just
apologize. I
fine.
stepped on your
You were
line. I apologize.
just fine.
At this time, I'd like to now return to the remaining files and consent calendar item number 3, the resolution to acquire property, and ask for approval of the remaining files.
Welcome a motion.
So moved.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then finally, given that there have been no conflicts or concerns raised about the remaining items on the consent calendar item, I would request approval of those items.
So moved.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.